Good morning, everybody, and welcome for the second part of the Info Day. I was joking that I want to go home early, but I want to finish this meeting indeed on time for everybody to start enjoying the weekend. It's a bit less crowded than it was yesterday, not unexpected. Yesterday we really had a full house, but it's good to see that so many of you after the party you had yesterday are still capable of coming here and listening to us. For today, again, we've got an interesting program. You've all seen it, and today's chair will be Jordi Torren, sitting next to me. Jordi is he described himself this morning as belonging to the furniture of the agency. He's worked here for over 25 years, and he's currently the head of the Evaluation and Innovation Department in the Veterinary Medicines Division. So I think he's best suited to chair this morning's session. Jordi, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Ivo, and good morning, everybody. Hope you didn't get too wet while coming here. We have a very interesting session today, a bit less legislation, and I will say more technical kind of focus. The first one is on 3 Rs, and the second one we're going to be focusing on innovation. So I'm going to start the first one. I guess you all remember COVID and what you were doing during COVID and what you hated the most during COVID. I personally, professionally, hated that we couldn't restart some of the working parties. That to me was tough. One of those was the 3 Rs working party. And I can tell you it took us a while to really to restart. And, you know, we were fighting. We really wanted to restart. I'm glad that once it restarted, it was restarted with a strong commitment. The 3 Rs was before run by the vets, by my colleague Nick Jarrett, who I think it's online, and we're still supporting, obviously. But I think that colleagues are going to give you today a very detailed presentation on what they are doing on 3 Rs. So first, we have Dr. Sonia Becken. Sonia holds a Master in Biological Science and a PhD in Pharmaceutical Science from the Vrije University in Brussels, and also a Master of Applied Toxicology. And most importantly, she's the chair of the CVMP-CHMP Joint 3 Rs Working Party. And that's one of the few truly joint working parties that we have at the agency, and it works very well. So, Sonia, please.
Thanks a lot for the kind introduction, and thanks for inviting me here. And I have the pleasure of taking you through what we have been doing with the 3 Rs Working Party. And I would like to start already with the focus that we are trying to advance innovation as well through application of the 3 Rs. So first of all, some good news. If we look at the numbers of animal used for regulatory purposes, and we compare the numbers between 2015 and 2022, which are the latest statistics available on the website of the Commission under the Allures database, we can see that we have a significant decrease in the animal numbers. And if we look a bit closer to the uses of the animals, we can see that we have significant decreases in 3 main areas. In quality control testing, more specifically in batch potency testing and pyrogenicity testing, and then also for topically applied products in skin sensitization testing. So, Jordi already mentioned it. We have a 3 Rs working party, a standing working party under the non-clinical domain of the CHMP. It's a joint working party, and if you are interested to look at our webpage, you have the references here. We have also a dedicated webpage on ethical use of animals, where you can find a lot of information and guidelines and documents, and a webpage to guide through regulatory acceptance of NAMs. And it's really a practical guide of how to go about to get your NAM accepted by for regulatory decision making. We have also a new work plan, which you can access through the QR code. And then finally, very recently, we published a biannual report 23-24, which we will continue to do so. in the future. Now, 3Rs are considered a lever for innovation, and that also is reflected in the definition for new approach methodologies. Now, if you are a bit acquainted with the term of 3Rs and NAMs, this is everywhere. And there are a lot of different definitions for NAMs, but we agreed on the definition of innovative test methods or testing approaches that are aimed to progressively replace, reduce, and refine traditional animal studies. And a lot of different methods can be applied: in vitro tools, in silico prediction models, in chemical tools, ex vivo, but also refined in vivo studies and other advanced biology-based approaches, and all kinds of combinations of these, mostly in weight of evidence approaches. Now, the NAMs are designed to generate data that will provide an equivalent or preferably even an improved translation to support both human and target species relevant regulatory decision making. Now, what has 3R's Working Party been doing to foster the 3Rs and NAMs uptake? And we have different buckets of activities. First is to provide guidance, the follow-up batch of quality control and batch release testing of centrally applied medicinal products. We engage with stakeholders. We also assess NAMs for regulatory acceptance, develop and provide training, and foster also the international dialogue. And I will try to give you some examples in each of the buckets. First of all, in the guidance. So the EMA 3R's Working Party has been drafting an inventory of all regulatory testing requirements for medicinal products for human use, but also for veterinary use. And my colleague Sarah will come back to the veterinary one just after me. So in the human paper, we can see that there are a lot of opportunities for 3R's implementation indicated that are already possible today, like the possibility of reduced non-clinical data packages for specific modalities, or the implementation of weight of evidence approaches to waive certain studies, like carcinogenicity studies or juvenile animal studies. And also there are guidelines that indicate the possibility to really use in vitro tools instead of an animal experiment for detecting embryo-fetal toxicity, for example. And this is the presentation for Sarah on the vet afterwards. Now, there is a lot of request from the stakeholders to have guidance on what do we want to see to get a NAM regulatory accepted. And therefore, we have a guideline on the principles of regulatory acceptance that really depicts the criteria to which a NAM should answer to be acceptable. And these are criteria like having a defined methodology, a demonstration of the relevance within a particular context of use to be used for regulatory decision making, reliability and robustness demonstration. And there is also the possibility for sharing of data to ensure that there is trust building on a particular NAM. Now, this guideline, which was drafted by the predecessor of the 3R's Working Party, is now under revision. And we are well advanced with the update of the body of the guideline and the inclusion of a glossary of terminologies. And we have also a dedicated drafting group to draft annexes with criteria for acceptance for complex in vitro tools for specific context of use. Now, how do we go about to accept NAMs? And this is in 3 steps, in fact, or 3 possibilities. New approach method data can be accepted on a case-by-case basis within a product submission, so a clinical trial application or a marketing authorization application. And then the worth of the data are evaluated on the basis of demonstration of scientific validity of the tool or merit of the data in relation to the relevance for the medicinal product and the indication sought. Another more formal pathway, of course, is the EMA qualification, and that will endorse broader use of the new approach method. Now, for NAMs that are applied for veterinary medicinal products, ITF and veterinary scientific advice procedures can be used. And then finally, of course, the golden grail, the integration of NAMs into guidelines or pharmacopoeial monographs, which is also possible as exemplified by the adoption of the MAT, for example, for pyrogenicity testing in the pharmacopoeia. There is a big focus on reducing the use of non-rodent species, and in particular non-human primates. And in answer to that, a reflection paper on non-human primate use in safety testing of human medicinal products was drafted. This reflection paper has finalized its public consultation, and this paper clearly promotes the use of NHPs only as a last resort. It leverages the existing flexibility in guidelines, pointing towards possibilities to waive studies in NHP or significantly reduce their reliance, and highlights also future possibilities for triage implementation, which might necessitate further work and possible NAMs and weight of evidence approaches. Moving over to the application of 3Rs in quality control and batch release testing, what did 3Rs Working Party do? Through its dedicated operational expert group, we reviewed 67 products, veterinary products, with 9 products that are still using batch release testing under the in vivo paradigm and with identified potential 3Rs opportunities. We have contacted the marketing authorization holders for these products, and we have adopted response letters to their reactions at CVMP in October of 25. We have done a similar exercise reviewing the data also for the human medicinal products, and you can see the number of products that we reviewed. And letters will now be sent to marketing authorization holders where we have identified 3Rs opportunities. At the end of all our endeavors, I would say, we will have probably a webinar under the European Specialized Expert Community with lessons learned on 3Rs opportunities for batch release testing to also further engage with the EU network and with the academics on board. Stakeholder engagement then, and this is very particular for 3Rs Working Party, that we have a very broad range of stakeholders. As you can see on the lower hand of the slide, we have on the left-hand side standing observers to the 3Rs Working Party, which are the different DGs from the European Commission, the European Reference Laboratory on the Validation of Alternative Methods under the GRC, and also EDQM. On the right-hand side, you see the different range of stakeholders, which are, of course, the pharma industry from the human and the vet side, CROs, but also Animal Welfare Association, NGOs, academic consortia and 3Rs centers, as well as the different agencies. Now, 3Rs Working Party engages with those stakeholders annually. We have consultations of our work plan. All reflection papers and guidelines are open for public consultation. And we have, of course, all our web pages and the ESEC to engage with academia. There are different interaction mechanisms of EMA on NAMs, where 3Rs Working Party is also engaging in. And we try to be present at collaborative fora, such as the European Partnership on Alternatives to Animal Testing, and also scientific meetings and the well-known, probably, European Commission roadmap to phase out animal testing for chemicals. Just an example of our 2025 stakeholder meeting, we had over 200 participants online where we presented the work plan 25-27, and we always have an interactive Slido where we query the people that are listening in on the biggest focus or the most important aspect when thinking about 3Rs in regulatory testing. And you can see from last year, as well as from the previous years, in fact, that regulatory acceptance is really at the heart of the attention. Now, we will have a new stakeholder meeting at the end of this month, and I invite you all, of course, to tune in and hear about our latest updates. Now, the actual hands-on work for regulatory acceptance of NAMs, where we are involved at 3R's Working Party, and this goes from scientific advice and advice on readiness of NAMs to go into the process either of qualification or to be integrated in product-specific dossiers under the Innovation Task Force and under the Portfolio and Technology meetings, up to actual scientific advice and qualification to accept really the NAMs and their data, and then finally the data sharing to engage with stakeholders to learn about the NAMs that are probably used mostly in discovery and which could be of interest for regulatory decision-making later on. Now, just to give you a flavor on the type of methods that were discussed through ITF meetings and that pertain to 3Rs, you can see that we have had a lot of methods submitted to us between 2019 and 23, and there was a horizon scanning report published not so long ago. And from the 3Rs type of technologies that were submitted, most were within the context of use of safety and toxicology testing, and a lot of very advanced methods were submitted with 2D and organ-on-chip methods, 3D in vitro models, but also in silico tools such as PBPK models and so on. Also good news, we will have imminently a first qualification of a NAM tool that will be published on the EMA website, and this is the qualification of virtual control groups to substitute for the use of concurrent control groups in non-clinical, non-GLP rat dose range finding studies to inform on dose selection for subsequent pivotal GLP-compliant repeat dose tox studies. So a whole mouthful to open the door really to using virtual control groups instead of actual animals for concurrent controls. And hopefully this can be the first step to further qualification of broader contexts of use for this approach. Training then, there is a dedicated non-clinical and new approach methodologies European Specialized Expert Community, or ESEC, where we really want to share information and interact between the non-clinical community of the European network and NAM experts within academics. And this, the trainings that are organized, and you can see here trainings that were organized since 23 up to early this year, are also available through the EU Network Training Center. International collaboration. So clearly, medicines development is a global business, and Europe cannot really work in isolation alone when we are discussing 3Rs acceptance criteria and trying to foster progress. So at the initiative of the EMA, we engaged into the setup of an international medicines regulators working group on 3Rs to really align or to discuss alignment on acceptance criteria for NAMs, on batch release testing requirements that are in line with the 3Rs, on phasing out of obsolete tests, and on also liaising with the International Coalition of Medicines Regulatory Authorities, or ICMRA. The veterinary regulators from all regions are not included by default. There are FDA vet representatives in the international group, but there are topic-based invitations that are done. And you can see here that we are joining efforts with PMDA from Japan, Swissmedic, Health Canada, the Australian TGA, as well as the US FDA. We had several meetings in 25, and the way of working is that we update on regional 3Rs developments at every meeting. We share NAM case studies and data between the different regions. We discuss harmonized guidance development and try to build confidence around the table and align stakeholder engagement. So as you can see, maybe in the key discussions on the right-hand side, and what is good to see is that we discuss qualification frameworks, we discuss voluntary submission of NAM data, and also there is an initiative now at the level of the ICH for the human side to have a reflection paper on NAM acceptance, and that will guide the further work of ICH in that frame of NAMS with dedicated ICH guidelines that could be developed, and also indicate possible ICH guidelines for revision with an aim to improve NAM uptake. And with that, I thank you for your attention, and I gladly give the floor to my co-chair.
Thank you very much, Sonia, and thank you very much for being on time. That was quite remarkable. So we have online Dr. Sarah Adler-Flynn. Sarah is the vice chair of the CBMP-CHMP 3 Hours Working Party. She holds a PhD in cell biology and is an European registered toxicology and scientific officer at the VVL. Sarah, please.
Yes, thank you for the kind introduction and for inviting me here to speak today. And my apologies for not being present in Amsterdam today. So I will talk now about scientific guidelines that are 3Rs related in the veterinary field. I start with 2 slides which are more introductory. So the 3Rs principles are laid down in Directive 2010/63 on the protection of animals used for scientific purposes. And our VMP regulation directly relates to this directive and says that all experiments on animals shall be conducted taking into account the principles laid down in Directive 2010/63, notwithstanding the place of conduct of the experiments. Next slide, please. So the 3Rs are applicable in all areas of VMP regulatory testing, and the 3Rs Working Party is working on implementing 3Rs approaches in upcoming guidelines and in guidelines under revision. And the aim is to replace animal studies with non-animal methods wherever possible, to reduce the animal studies to a minimum, and in addition to refine practices to minimize stress of the animals. Next slide, please. So for the content of my presentation, I will start with a reflection paper on 3Rs in veterinary regulatory testing that Sonia mentioned already. I will talk quite a bit on 2 user safety guidelines and touch at the end shortly on the guideline on the principles of regulatory acceptance of 3Rs testing approaches. Next slide, please. Might be that I have a delay in. Now I see it. So the reflection paper on 3Rs in veterinary regulatory testing, the current version is from 2018. The revision is very far advanced, and the revised paper was published for consultation last year. The publication of the final paper is planned for this year, and we included opportunities on 3Rs methods that serve decision-making for risk assessment of VMPs in a regulatory context, and also approaches for reduction or refinement have been included, and reference is made to the ITF procedure and to scientific advice procedure to promote 3Rs methods. Next slide, please. I think I have a delay here. I still see the same slide.
Which slide are you seeing now?
I see the slide 5 still.
Yeah, and now?
Now I see the slide 6. Yeah, perfect. Sorry, I hope it won't take too long because of that. So the reflection paper shows different columns, and these are for the topic of testing, for the regulatory provision, for animal testing requirements, for implemented 3Rs opportunities, and lastly, for newly identified opportunities for 3Rs implementation. Next slide, please. Oh, I'm really sorry for that. So for the categorization of 3Rs opportunities, importantly, the implemented 3Rs opportunities, they refer to 3Rs opportunities that are already implemented in current guidance documents, while newly identified 3Rs opportunities refer to opportunities that are not yet implemented in guidance documents, but that are already acceptable for regulatory decision-making by CVMP today. So this means that new 3Rs methods that are currently in development are not included in this paper. Next slide, please. So for example, on genotoxicity testing, we have in the column implemented 3Rs opportunity that in principle, the choice of tests can be modified if appropriate, and that option 1 of the standard battery of tests in VICH guideline 23 provides for only one in vivo study for genotoxicity testing, and that genotoxicity endpoints can be incorporated into other in vivo tests, for example, repeated dose studies. And for the newly identified opportunities for 3Rs implementation, we have included the European position here that unless there are other concerns, waiving of in vivo studies if all in vitro tests are clearly negative might be considered. So this is not per se new, but it is not implemented in current guidance. Next slide, please. So as I said, we had a public consultation phase last year, and we received many comments by different stakeholders. By far the most comments we received by industry and animal welfare organizations, but we received also comments by the European Commission and by EDQM, and also, for example, by the Association of Veterinary Consultants, European Animal Research Association, European Veterinarians in Education, Research and Industry, Federations of Veterinarians in Europe, and also one from the International Plasma and Fractionation Association. Next slide, please. And we received different comments on the different working party tables, of course. We received, I think there was a slide missing actually. So we have different tables for different working parties, and these are the safety working party, the quality working party, the novel therapies and technologies working party, the immunologicals working party, the environmental risk assessment working party, and the efficacy working party. And these have different tables, and we received different comments by stakeholders on these tables. And by far the most comments were on the safety working party, followed by the immunologicals working party, then the efficacy working party, and then the environmental risk assessment working party, and also the other tables, of course, were commented on. Next slide, please. So on general comments, we received an overall support for the activity and for newly proposed 3Rs opportunities. There were comments on the consistency of terminology, on the scope, clarity, and structure of the document, on defining better the target audience. There were suggestions on different wordings and also for further 3Rs opportunities. Next slide, please. Seems there's again a delay.
Which slide do you see?
11 still.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Yeah.
And now?
So still 11. I think there's just a delay now. Now it's 12. So I want to give two examples because these comments differ, of course, by stakeholders. The first example on comments by industry. They would like to see more harmonization with international guidelines, especially with VICH guidelines. They raised concerns that 3Rs concepts could place marketing approvals for new product developments at significant risk. They would like to see more guidance for scientific justification for acceptance of 3Rs approaches and on negligible exposure. They expressed the fear of need for parallel validation exercises alongside guideline-compliant methods, and also had several additional suggestions for 3Rs opportunities. Next slide, please. And the next example is on animal welfare organizations. They commented on enforcement of implementation of Directive 2010/63. They would like to see stronger emphasis on replacement methods. For some endpoints, they suggested to move newly identified opportunities for 3Rs in the implemented 3Rs opportunities column. They would like to see more alignment with the human reflection paper. They also had several additional 3R suggestions, including methods which are currently in development. And they suggested to organize a formal forum to discuss 3Rs opportunities. Next slide, please. Again, a delay.
Sonia, we also see the slides here in the room. So yeah, there is a little delay, but we know when it's happening, so don't worry. Yep.
Okay, now it's the next slide. Okay, so you see it as well. That's already good. So some important considerations. The veterinary reflection paper is intended to provide guidance on acceptable 3Rs opportunities that can be used today in VMP regulatory testing, and therefore only ready-to-use 3Rs approaches were incorporated that are already acceptable during authorization processes. And also VMP testing is laid down in Regulation 2019/6, which allows for only limited flexibility. Next slide, please. And also VMPs are differently regulated than human medicinal products. So human medicinal products have a benefit for the human patient, and the human target populations and exposure are well defined. While for VMPs, only the target animals have a benefit from exposure, but not human users and consumers. And importantly, for consumer risk assessment, no single sensitive population groups, for example, children or pregnant women, can be excluded from the exposure. So therefore, no 100% alignment of veterinary and human reflection papers is possible. Next slide, please. So the next step, the drafting group is currently discussing all comments and incorporate changes where possible. Then these will be suggested to the working parties and to CVMP. And afterwards, the reflection paper will go for adoption by CVMP and CHMP. And for this year, we expect that we will be able to communicate responses to all the comments and to publish the adopted reflection paper. Next slide, please. So next, I want to speak on 2 user safety guidelines. Next slide, please. So we have the so-called general user safety guideline, the guideline on user safety for pharmaceutical veterinary medicinal products, and also the guideline on user safety of topically administered veterinary medicinal products currently under revision. Next slide, please. So I start with a general user safety guideline. The current version is from 2010. The rest on the slides refers actually to both guidelines because the revision is done in parallel. So for both, the revision is currently in progress. The safety working party is in lead for these revisions. The 3Rs working party participates in both drafting groups and also provided comments that are currently reviewed. The planned adoption of the guideline draft by CVMP is expected for May this year, and afterwards there will be a public consultation phase. Next slide, please. So to start with the general guideline, we included some 3Rs proposals in the current draft version. Importantly, this is a draft version. This is not adopted by CVMP yet, so these are just suggestions we incorporated. So there is an inclusion of OECD in vitro methods for local tolerance testing, so for skin and eye irritation and skin sensitization. We included reference to the VMP reflection paper on opportunities for 3Rs, and also importantly, always the most recent version should be addressed for reference because we plan to update this reflection paper regularly. Then toxicity tests should, where advised, follow a stepwise approach, and we give the example of the genotoxicity testing. Then use of existing data is encouraged, including opportunity for root-to-root extrapolation. We recommend to derive information on single-dose toxicity from existing studies, for example, from repeated dose or developmental toxicity studies. And very important, validated or qualified alternative test methods should be employed whenever possible. Next slide, please. So I will speak about more now on the OECD in vitro methods for local tolerance testing, because here is a little problem. The regulation says that for products for which there may be exposure to skin and eyes, irritation and sensitization studies shall be provided. Those studies shall be conducted with a final formulation. And we included the text that new data should be generated using in vitro methods as described in current OECD guidelines. However, many of these test methods have not been validated for mixture. So we included another text that it would be acceptable to test the single substances of the VMP using these in vitro methods instead of the final product formulation. And as I said, this still needs adoption by CVMP. And additionally, historical data or published literature on the ingredients of the formulation can be employed to assess potential local effects. And if the substance is irritating to the skin, it is assumed that it is also irritating to the eyes. Next slide, please. So then we also provided additional guidance on significant user exposure. This was also a request by stakeholders in one of our preceding 3Rs Working Party stakeholder meetings. And here the regulation says that for the evaluation of user safety, standard developmental toxicity testing in accordance with standard tests based on established guidance shall be performed in all cases where significant user exposure may be expected. So we incorporated some text on this topic. Significant user exposure is expected where systemic exposure to the substance is possible, and significant exposure is not expected where it can be demonstrated that absorption will lead to negligible systemic exposure. So this means that substances would not be absorbed. Then certain characteristics of the product formulation can result in negligible exposure. So for example, coated or non-divisible tablets. And where standard developmental toxicity tests are not provided, adequate justification and supporting data for the omission of studies should be provided. Next slide, please. This takes a while again. So this means where systemic exposure cannot be avoided, the risk to pregnant users needs to be assessed. And also for this case, we provided some additional 3Rs recommendation concerning developmental toxicity studies. So first, all existing information on developmental toxicity should be employed in a weight of evidence approach that supports a quantitative risk assessment. This means it should allow for the derivation of a safe dose for the user. For example, such information can include studies from published literature, data derived from in vitro methods, observations in humans, etc. And if no adequate conclusion on a safe dose or a mitigable risk for pregnant women can be drawn based on available information, standard developmental toxicity tests will be required. Next slide, please. So I spoke a lot on the general guideline, on the topical guideline, just very few slides. Here, the current version is from 2018. And as I said, both revisions are run in parallel. So the rest on the slide is just the same as for the other guideline. Next slide, please. So for this guideline, we also included many 3Rs related amendments. For example, conducting new animal studies should be avoided wherever possible. We also made reference to the VMP reflection paper. And here, importantly, the 3Rs Working Party developed a decision tree for the derivation of dermal toxicological relevant values to potentially avoid in vivo testing for dermal toxicity. So this decision tree starts with using existing information and how to deal with that. Next slide, please. So I come to the last guideline now, the guideline on the principles of regulatory acceptance of 3Rs testing approaches. Next slide, please. So here the current version is from 2016. Sonia said already a little bit on this, so you have a bit of repetition now. The revision is currently in progress. The scope of the revision was published in a concept paper, and we include definitions of critical triage-related terminology in the body of the guideline. And Sonia mentioned the example of NAMS, which is quite important currently. And then annexes are included, providing regulatory acceptance criteria for organ-on-chip models for specific context of use to be applied mainly in the human pharmaceutical area. So one heart-on-chip context of use for safety pharmacology testing, and one liver-on-chip context of use for prediction for predicting drug-induced liver injury. Next slide, please. So it is a very complex revision and necessitates a stepwise approach. We have an overarching steering group that oversees the guideline revision, and then we have several drafting groups. We have the terminology drafting group that deals with definitions of triage terms. Here the status is quite advanced, and a public consultation phase is expected for this year. And then we have annex-specific drafting groups. The first has started already, the drafting group on regulatory acceptance criteria for hard-on-chip context of use for safety pharmacology testing. Also here, the work is quite advanced already. And a second annex-specific drafting group has not started yet. This will be the drafting group on regulatory acceptance criteria for liver-on-chip context of use for predicting drug-induced liver injury. Next slide, please. I think this will be my last slide, yes. So the summary 3Rs are applicable for all areas of regulatory testing, and the 3Rs Working Party is working on implementing 3Rs approaches in upcoming guidelines and in guidelines under revision. The revision of the 3Rs Working Party veterinary reflection paper in VMP regulatory testing is very advanced and will be finalized this year, hopefully. The revision of the 2 user safety guidelines is ongoing, and many 3Rs approaches have been included. Here, the public consultation phase is expected for this year. And lastly, the complex revision of the guideline on regulatory acceptance of 3Rs testing approaches, which is, of course, not a main veterinary guideline, but an overarching guideline, is ongoing and follows a stepwise approach. Next slide, please. That was the last one. So I thank you very much for your attention, and I'm sorry for the delay between different slides.
Thank you very much, Sarah, and well, apologies from our side for the technical glitches. It's obviously not your fault. I have a housekeeping announcement. I've been told by Katerina that there are some issues with the Teams connection, and that it might be better if we go to the event webpage and connect through the link that you can find there. And correct, Katerina? Yeah, I got the green light from my colleagues. Before I pass to the industry, may I mention that we have here in the room our colleague, Orla Moriarty, who is the scientific lead of the 3Rs Working Party. Orla, if you want to put your hand up so colleagues can ask you during the coffee break very difficult questions, you know. Thanks for your all hard work. Okay, so we moving on. The next presenter is going to be Kat Stirling. And Kat is Director of Regulatory Affairs at Zoetis. She has a PhD in veterinary immunology from the Paul Wright Institute. And she had been a couple of years at VND, something I didn't remember, but she's now at Zoetis. Before I let you start, when looking at the slides, impressive work also from the industry in this area. Not a fight, but more a collaboration. Let's do it pragmatic, I think.
Thank you, Jordi. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. So yeah, I'm not going to focus on guidelines in this presentation, more talk a bit about initiatives for industry and sharing some information with this wider industry group of some of the key areas I think we're going to have to focus on as an industry, and as Jordi says, collaborating with the regulators moving forward. Let's see if this works. Okay, so I think from an industry point of view, overall, there are kind of three key areas of focus, and Sonia touched on this, for innovation, and it's not just all about regulated testing. There's obviously the batch potency testing area, so removing or replacing the safety and efficacy tests, the angle of exposure and environmental testing, both regulated testing and research testing for human food safety, user safety, environmental safety. And this is very much an area where there's extensive overlap between the veterinary and the human health side of things, and also with other sectors like chemicals, cosmetics, etc., where much of that human toxicity safety testing is common test methods. So we have a huge amount of overlap there, where anything that's potentially qualified for use in human health is equally applicable to a veterinary context. And finally, looking at 3Rs and reducing our animal usage in non-regulated early research. So where, and I'll come back to this at the end, where we can leverage new technologies to reduce our reliance on animals in that very early phase before we actually have to go into our target species. And very much working with the EMA 3Rs task force as it was previously, now the group that Sonia and Sarah lead, on guidance, cross-sectorial collaboration and supporting innovation in NAMs. And the one thing I've learned over probably nearly 20 years of working in this space is the importance of that collaboration and that early engagement between the NAMs developers, industry and the regulators. And as Sarah and Sonia touched on, our main interaction points in leveraging this with EMA and CVMP is Innovation Task Force and scientific advice. I won't go into detail on this slide, but Sonia touched on this, that a lot of what's driving this in the chemical space is the European Citizens Initiative, which has led to the Commission developing their roadmap for phasing out animal use in chemical safety testing. I don't know how many people in the room have had much visibility to this. There's been various meetings with the Commission. We expect to see that final roadmap, I think, now in sometime in the second quarter. We're waiting for that, to see that with interest. And once that's shared, that will then give us some more idea of what the Commission's plans will be moving forward. We also see, as the new human health medicines regulation, which is almost complete, a huge amount more embedded in there from a 3Rs point of view. I think it's completed the trilogues now, so we expect to see a lot of this further embedding of NAMs within that. And I think it was touched on yesterday that we have a NAMs definition in the Biotech Act, and both ourselves and other stakeholders are very keen to make sure that that definition is revised to ensure it's broad enough to include not just in vitro methods, but also refinements and reductions to make sure that it's broad enough. And we'll come back to the concept of virtual control groups, because that's essentially a reduction and a refinement, not a replacement, or a NAM. So we're seeing a lot more 3Rs, NAMs related focus embedded in legislation, which gives us the legal basis in Europe to move forward with these alternatives. So a little bit more detail on what we're doing around batch release testing. So we have a number of opportunities in this, and Sonia gave you some numbers, which I think reflect just centralised products, but we know there's probably still a lot more of national DCP and MRP products that still contain animal release tests, and many vaccines that are small-scale, limited markets, etc., which makes it very challenging for industry to do the work to develop and validate and do the regulatory procedures to replace these. So I think there's a general need for training with both regulators internationally and globally, and with companies on how to approach those transition, to support predictable and efficient timelines to do this, and a really clear understanding of the expectations of what those data packages need to look like from a vaccine point of view to make that transition from an in vivo to an in vitro test. For those of you who are not aware, Pharmacopoeia Chapter 5214 provides really good guidance for industry, and we're working now on a VICH guideline aimed at helping globally, which has come out of what we have in Europe with 5214 to create a VICH guideline for that transition from in vivo to in vitro potency. We're also working through Health for Animals at a global level. We have another 3Rs task force there where we're working on improved WOHA terrestrial manual chapters to support 3Rs in batch release, because one of the things we've seen at that international level is for many countries If it's not detailed somewhere in that WOA manual, they won't accept it. We can't move, or if there's only one method there. So it's important that we work through to make sure that that guidance is in place globally. Another key area I'm going to talk a bit more about is endotoxin testing, or bacterial endotoxin testing, and that transition from the LAL method, which uses horseshoe crab, to recombinant methods. And this represents a global strategic and validation challenge for industry. And I wanted to put a bit more in this, having been at a EDQM EPAA pyrogen workshop. Sonia and I both presented there a couple of weeks ago. If anybody's interested, the EDQM link at the bottom there provides a link to where all the slides sit. But I think everybody should be aware there are new pharmacopoeia chapters in pyrogen testing. As Sonia mentioned, the rabbit pyrogen test has been removed, completely removed, and replaced by monocyte activation test and bacterial endotoxin testing. And the general monographs on endotoxin testing now also include a compendial method for recombinant factor C. So that the reference is up there. So for those of you who are not aware, the current method we're all generally using for endotoxin testing uses horseshoe crab blood. Horseshoe crabs are endangered. It's one of those really sensitive environmental topics. And overall, there will potentially be a longer-term concern with long-term supply of those reagents, especially if there's increasing environmental pressure around the continued use of horseshoe crabs. And EDQM expressed an interest 2 weeks ago that eventually they would also like to remove that LAL method from the pharmacopoeia. Right now, that method is still there, and industry has the option to choose. But companies are going to have to look at making that switch. And for anybody who's touched on this, this is not an insignificant task. The endotoxin tests are used across the GMP environment, reagent testing, but also in many tests, regulated tests on product for release. So it's an area that I wanted to flag to everybody in the room from an industry point of view that we need to work on, and a message to CVMP that we will need to work together with you to work out how we can do this in an efficient way, because on a product basis, we're going to have to be able to look at grouped variations, matrix-type validation that will allow this to be efficient for industry to make that transition and do that validation for the switch. So that is a coming attraction, and if people do want more information about this, please reach out and let us know. We can share what we've got here, and we can ensure that we have further dialogue with the EMA and the 3 Rs Working Party and the other relevant working parties to support that guidance for industry and how we're going to approach that. Another example of when we're doing in vaccine-based testing, this is for the binnacle assay for tetanus vaccine safety testing. Again, not going to go into detail. The slides are here, which you'll have access to. But if anybody's interested in collaborating with us on this project, where it's looking at encouraging the use of this, ensuring reagent sustainability and access for the binnacle testing, please let me know. So this is a project we're driving through the EPAA, and the EPAA provide us very many opportunities for that collaboration and working together on 3 Rs options. So then exposure environmental safety testing. Here we've developed an Animal Health Europe sector-specific roadmap in advance of what the Commission are going to put out, because we wanted to work together to have an industry strategic approach of where we wanted to focus and what we could do. Our starting point was obviously the regulation itself, which provides a rigorous standard and the data we need to put in dossiers. But the need that we still need animal-based data, and here animal-based, I mean generally the kind of non-target species data. So we all know we will continue to have to use our target species to demonstrate safety and efficacy for the target population, but there's still a lot of testing for toxicity, safety, potency, etc., that we are still doing in animals, non-target species. And a need that we actively needed to collaborate with the EMA working parties, the International Medicines Working Group that was touched on. And for references, if you're interested, FPA Human Health, they also have a sector-specific roadmap, and the links on the bottom of the slides there. And this was very much looking at where alternatives exist. The basket diagram comes from FPA, and we're using the same sort of concept of 3 baskets of looking at where NAMs already exist or have been accepted and we need to promote their use, NAMs in development, and then that final, more difficult bucket of where there's no NAMs right now. And we're using a traffic light system for quick reference to kind of target focus areas. So just to give you a couple of examples from that, we're looking to identify areas where, example, good progress has been made, so acute toxicity, irritation, sensitization, and some in batch release testing. The bigger challenge areas are in repeat chronic tox, reproductive developmental toxicity, still in batch testing, particularly batch potency, and environmental endpoints. And the other challenge we have is global misalignment, which can often lead to duplicate testing, regulatory delays and costs. I mean, I think that the sense, and this seems to be consistent across the board, is it can take industry 4 to 5 years at a global level to transition one method globally, which is a long time where you're potentially having to do duplicate testing. And it was interesting, I think Sonia mentioned the ICH approach on an overarching 3 Rs guideline, and I think it would be interesting from a veterinary point of view if we look at having a parallel guidance, overarching VICH guidance for 3 Rs in the veterinary sector also. And if anybody's interested in just kind of general, the link on the bottom's for a really nice review of NAM's methods in human health. It's a recent one, so it provides a good guideline. Strategic priorities are those kind of difficult areas, so repeat and chronic tox, batch potency and safety, reproductive and environmental. And really, we're looking at making proposals for NAMs for regulatory acceptance and validation and focusing on areas where we think we can make progress. And also improved mapping and harmonisation. It's really critical for industry as a whole to have visibility in what has been accepted, what type of approaches have been accepted, so that will encourage companies to then use them. We can utilise parallel scientific advice with the FTA, I mentioned VICH, and the International Medicines Regulatory Working Group to try and enhance that global alignment and get the regulators to work together with industry so we don't end up in a situation where, for example, the FDA develop one method and Europe are proposing something else. And there's an absolute need to invest in collaborative research and drive those regulatory updates. Recommended actions, detailed actionable plans, the need for funding, gaps and metrics, touched on that, mutual recognition, global guidelines. And the aim for our roadmap is to set out a feasible direction where we can actually make progress and deliver actually on results. And again, the same message again, that need for collaboration, investment, clear policies and committed stakeholders. Another example, this is one which we're trying to drive through here. This is for qualification of an alternative to the fish acute toxicity test. This is a project, if anybody's interested again in being involved in this, we've got 5 companies committed to this right now, which is great, but if anybody else is interested, please let us know. We're hopefully going to drive this through EPAA, through a safe harbour type of approach, working with the EMA, with the aim to accommodate being able to phase out that acute fish tox test within 2 years. And there's a lot of opportunities. We continue to work in this space, working with EPAA. We have partners forums regularly. There was a useful one on exposure assessment, working with groups like PARC. So again, there's many of these collaborative European-driven partnerships. And also exploring the use of big data and AI to reduce our animal usage. That's where some of this work on virtual controls is coming from. And again, there's a nice reference there from Thomas Hartung on the use of AI in chemicals safety risk assessment, which is all about driving NAMs. EPAA also did a nice review of regulatory requirements for the second non-rodent species in repeat dose tox. Again, identifying opportunities for that, and it provides a good cross-sector working group to map the initiatives and provide really clear understanding of what's possible and where our next steps might be. I'm not going to go into detail. This is the Victor project, which is all about virtual control groups, and Sonia mentioned this. The slides are in here, so I'm going to skip over the slides about Victor, but essentially it's this concept of replacing your actual concurrent control group with a virtual control group created from historical data. A big group of companies involved, along with SMEs, academic institutes, and critically also CROs who are involved in actually doing this testing. Impact, ultimately reducing our animal usage. And this is what Sonia was talking about, where they've been going through this EMA qualification step for different contexts of use. We're only at the first step, so we expect to see that soon. As Sonia said, this is driven through human health, but it would be nice to see some statements, and this is a question for CVMP, if we could get some guidance that this qualification is also potentially relevant in a veterinary context, because it's the same approach. There's no reason why that approach cannot be relevant, and it would be, I think, valuable for industry when some of these things are pushed through the human health side of things to have some indication from CVMP whether this could also be applicable to veterinary medicine. And finally, just touching on discovery research. So, as I said, it's an area we're looking at. You won't necessarily see this in the regulated dossiers, but it is an area where industry are working to use things like real-world evidence, big data, AI tools to leverage existing data, to use modelling technology to predict in vivo activity in early screening, so reducing our need to go into animals early to be able to screen compounds much faster using in vitro technology. Exploring external control arms and control data. So that's a little bit different to virtual control. So this is external control data. I'm working on understanding in vivo and ex vivo models. So it was touched on there that there's work in the 3Rs working parties around specific contexts of use for microphysiological systems, organs on a chip for both cardiac and liver. Same sort of principle in early screening. So we don't have to have them validated to the same level, but they're useful in early research. And also areas where we can do refinements in early vaccine work where we can avoid challenge and understand whether something's going to work. And finally, just a comment on our commitment to the 3Rs and animal welfare. I mean, it's what we do. We absolutely support animal health and welfare, commitment to animal-free batch testing, and a commitment to engage with the regulatory and academic sector cross-sectorally to work towards reducing our animal usage. And we follow the 3Rs principle in everything we do. And a final thought is, how can we do more and better? And that was part of sharing everything with you here, is the continued need for communication from the regulators and what's been accepted. And also a question, would training for industry, especially SMEs, be helpful in how we use and approach NAMs to try and encourage and increase that use? And with that, that's my last slide. And I'm going to hand over to Jyoti. Jordi, do you want to do an intro first? And I'll pass the...
And thank you very much, Kat, for the presentation. So, in the interest of time, I'm going to introduce Yota Soni Gupta. Dr. Yoti is president of the Association of Veterinary Consultants, have been working on the animal health industry for over 20 years and has a PhD in veterinary university from the University College of Dublin. She's the founder of Ziva Health Regulatory Consultancy, so an entrepreneur. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks very much for this kind introduction. Can you hear me? I think so, yeah. On behalf of AVC, I would like to express my sincere thanks and gratitude to EMA to give us this opportunity. I would be presenting industry perspective on reflection paper providing the current regulatory testing requirements for veterinary medicinal products and opportunities for implementation of the 3Rs. The consultation on this draft reflection paper was closed on 30th of June 2025. What does this reflection paper offer to the industry? It integrates recent advancements and methods related to the 3Rs. It is suitable for regulatory-based decision-making during veterinary medicinal product assessment. It provides comprehensive and precise guidance on regulatory requirements on animal testing and viable alternatives. It covers a broad range of areas, including quality, safety, efficacy, innovative therapies, immunologicals, and environmental considerations. It provides a balanced industry perspective on feasibility, barriers, and future direction. It is highly appreciated, extremely informative, and a very valuable resource, and we would like to convey our thanks. However, given the rapid advancements in scientific, technological, and regulatory framework, it is essential to update guidance document regularly, for example, on annual basis, to ensure the 3R approach remains appropriate for the assessment of quality, safety, and efficacy parameters. What can be actioned now? Acceptance and adoption of existing 3R approaches. For example, innovation task force and scientific advice, which is very helpful. Need for joint industry, regulatory training and learning, training and best practices on 3Rs. For example, workshops based on information exchange and case studies, and which are highly effective in other sectors. For example, ECHA. Longer time scale to achieve includes NAM, as Kat and Sonia has already mentioned, development and validation specific and relevant to veterinary target species, international harmonization. Implementation of 3Rs for veterinary specific use. Some examples for replacement potential areas are in vitro toxicity models, organ-on-chip and advanced cell system, physiologically based pharmacokinetic modeling, computational exposure modeling, use of existing data, literature, and class effects, and it is promising for user safety and environmental fate prediction, dose selection, and mechanistic toxicology. For reduction, approaches which can reduce duplication of studies, for example, optimized and adaptive study designs, statistical modeling, shared control groups, use of historical control data, regulatory reliance on existing data sets, work sharing between member states, integration of pharmacovigilance data and farm monitoring system. For refinement, approaches relevant mainly for efficacy and target animal safety studies, less invasive sampling techniques, remote monitoring and digital biomarkers, earlier endpoints, improved housing and handling, precision dosing and targeted study designs. There are challenges, and what are those different challenges and barriers? Scientific challenges include diversity of target species, biological variability, limited validation of alternative models, complex disease endpoints. Regulatory challenges include uncertainty around acceptance of novel methodologies, variability between member states, need for robust validation frameworks. Operational challenges include legal regulatory expectations, global development programs requiring alignment across jurisdictions, and investment requirements for alternative technologies. Implementation of 3Rs across different company types, they have their own challenges. Large pharmaceutical companies, they have greater access to modeling tools and data. They have a dedicated regulatory science functions, and they have a stronger capacity for innovation. Whereas for SMEs, they have limited resources, reliance on traditional study paradigms, and higher perceived regulatory risk in adopting novel approaches. For future outlook, regulatory evolution to reduce ambiguity for industry developers and broader acceptance of advanced alternatives, for example, regular updating and revision of guidelines, specific acceptance criteria for complex methods, NAMs, cross-sector collaboration, for example, partnership between regulators, industry, and research organizations to promote shared development of standards, reference data, NAMs, and validation frameworks, integration of artificial intelligence in study design, progressive reduction of pre-authorization animal testing, encourage industry and regulators to use this document, and conduct of regular trainings by regulatory agencies for the effective implementation of 3Rs. At the end, I would like to convey my special thanks to Dr. Tim Rowan, Chair of 3Rs Working Party Association of Veterinary Consultants, for support in the preparation and finalization of slides. Thanks, Tim. And thank you to everyone for your kind attention. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So, time for questions. We have one on the screen, and I'll give a bit of time to Sarah to think about it, but in the meantime, do you have any questions from the room? You're going to have a long time for coffee if you don't have any questions.
Say, can I ask the room a question? Or, no, Ellie's got a question. I'll let Ellie go first. I would be really interested to get everybody's feedback, particularly from Access Vet Med companies and those consultants in the room, about the value and the need for training for industry on some of this area. Sonia touched on it, training for the network and training for regulators and academia, but we haven't talked about that for industry. And do folks in the room think that would be valuable, and it's something we should look at that will help companies understand how to use some of these NAMs, even once they're in guidelines? Is there a need for some more targeted industry training to support actual use of it for the future?
Absolutely. Yep. Training is definitely required, especially for small companies who have very limited resources. It's very important to get training and to understand what are the new developments and how they can implement in a cost-effective. Cost is a big consideration for smaller companies. And that's a big reluctance to move to next method because they have established procedure, they have invested for the existing method, and moving and taking higher regulatory risk is something no one wants to take.
Could I add, Catherine? I think that's definitely the area.
Sorry, can I ask you to move closer to the mic?
Sorry,
Thank you very much.
apologies. Absolutely, and especially in the terms of use of AI, and because there's a lot happening in the AI world, but we can't see how that is reliable in the terms of EMA perspective, basically, at what extent we can use the AI in those scenarios. Thank you.
I guess artificial intelligence, just a second, it's one of the key questions. You know that at the agency we are working very hard on the artificial intelligence. I think we can be proud that we're quite advanced on the area. Sometimes the difficulty for us is to identify on the veterinary division, how can we use some of the resources that are invested on the human side? But if you see opportunities, please let us know, because we are willing to collaborate into this area. You were saying, Ivo, that there is a question. Elsa?
Yes, thank you. And because Kat was inviting as well Access VetMed, indeed, I think that for the generic companies, even if the angle may be a bit different, but we have in the past also proposed options for bioequivalent studies. And Spilla is here, correct me if I'm saying something completely nonsense. But we have tried to make proposals as well in forums. So sometimes it's also good to have a bit of a framework, what is possible, what is not, what the options are. So absolutely. And thanks, Kat, for opening the door to Access VetMed as well. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe interesting to note, and it will not cover probably all the requests for training that are very detailed, but in our work plan we have also the action of organizing a conference to really state where we are, and maybe we could have dedicated sessions that inform stakeholders on particular topics as well. So it's good to hear your feedback, that we can take that with us as well. Thank you.
Yeah, in relation to 3R, in the past we have been trying to reuse data, specifically on safety, for seeds that have been conducted 20 years, 25 years ago, where we know that these studies do not comply to the current requirements, but where we, with justification, try to support the reuse, and especially since quite a lot of field data is available, we consider to be successful in that regard. But we have been seeing very variable success with some, certainly if you look at national competent authorities, are being very conservative in that approach and still requesting to have studies in line with the current requirements. So again, redoing studies that already have been done for these seeds. So a question maybe to CVMP or to you in general. Could the guidelines be more reflective upon that approach, so that for these more conservative members that we could rely upon some text to refer to, because it is very unpredictable for us to know in which countries this would be acceptable or not?
I will refer this to Sarah.
Sarah, do you want to answer?
Thank you for this. I can answer shortly, but perhaps Johan can answer better on that. I think the problem with that, how it sounds, is that it would be only always a case-by-case decision, because you have to see the study and then decide if it's relevant to base your decision on that. And I don't think any of us can answer that generally. Of course, national agencies might answer differently than we would do in central procedures, but also there, I don't think that we really have an influence on that. If there could be a CVMP decision on this, perhaps we could include it in certain guidance. But I think at the end, it will be always a case-by-case decision on the central level, at least, depending on the quality of data. But perhaps Johan wants to add something on that.
Johan?
Yes, thank you. And yeah, of course, I can't speak for the member states, but guidelines are guidelines, they're not legislation, and most of the guidelines contain sentences like you have to do this unless otherwise justified. So there always possibility, if you have a good justification, to deviate from a guideline. So, and I think most of the guidelines have those phrases. So that's what I can say.
Christina, can I ask everyone to introduce yourself? Maybe, I mean, I know that you know Johan, but thank you.
Okay, I'll reintroduce myself, Christina Patterson, now with my referrals hat on and not the regulatory affairs one. Just to echo what Sarah was saying, in referrals, you know, they're often on old products. The data that we receive in referrals is very, very old, if we're lucky enough to receive data. And yes, it is assessed and we can reach some conclusions, but those are, depending on the quality of the data, as Sarah just said, they're not necessarily the conclusion that you want to. So it's not that it's not acceptable, but it's tricky to always justify if you're going for a certain indication, but the study was done 20 years ago and you don't have all the data that would be needed for that specific indication. It gets...
Yeah, and of course, I 100% agree that it's up to the applicant to defend whether these data gaps could be justified. But I think I was just wondering whether in a guidelines we could just be a bit more transparent on that concept. Because if you look in the current available guidelines, there is just one document, I think, about a reflection on the European Pharmacopoeia and whether you can justify that you're no longer in requirements with the current requirements where you did the studies in the past. So it would be just asking whether in a guideline there could be a bit more reflection upon the concept of the reuse of old data, if of course the justifications can be made that it's still applicable. Just a question.
Thank you very much. I think, well, no?
Yeah, just a reaction, because this is a similar reflection that we had also on the human side on leveraging the flexibility that already exists in the guideline and having more kind of a text around this that points to say, yes, you can leverage that flexibility, and we can see whether what we have put in the reflection papers helps you in that sense, or whether we need to have a greater emphasis on leveraging that flexibility on a case by case with justification and the quality of data, but that it is there. And maybe if that could be sufficient, that would be something.
Yes, that would be really appreciated. Thank you.
Okay, I mean, you mentioned the lack of certainty. I think as regulators, one of our major task is to provide certainty. I think that's one of the best things that we can do. But there is one thing that I'm very clear is that the 3 Rs working party is really trying to give you the opportunity to talk to them. They have those stakeholders meetings. They put a lot of effort in those. We have here invited, during the info days. So one thing I'm proud is that we are trying to listen and trying to learn what do you need. And I know that colleagues are taking note of that. Okay, Ivo has a question.
No, it's more a few remarks that I have. And now, first and foremost, let me thank all the speakers of this morning, because I think it's really excellent to hear all the speakers, all the perspective and the commitment that everybody has to driving this forward. And I was impressed with the enormous amount of work presented by Sonja that the 3 Rs Working Party has delivered. And I fully understand the concerns that there are that this not always leads automatically to regulatory acceptance. And because the regulatory acceptance of novel methodologies, alternatives to tests, is not with the 3 Rs Working Party. It's with the regulators in the national competent authorities and CVMP ultimately. I think CVMP has always been very open to accepting alternative tests, and what needs to be built obviously is the confidence and in the whole network that alternative assays can provide you with sufficient information to take a regulatory decision. One of the things that I spotted was the voluntary data submission, slide 17 in Sonja's presentation. Years ago, I already opted for more data sharing. The industry is sitting on a heap of data on alternatives for animal testing, and also things that don't work, that didn't work when they tried, things that did work. And what we see instead is that we get individual proposals from industry in individual dossiers that we have to decide upon that may be very well applicable to other parts of the industry as well. And that can only be achieved if there's, let's say, a sort of push forward that we do share those data, because we cannot disclose what we know from the individual dossiers that we have on the table. We could easily use artificial intelligence to get it all up and to say, this is what we do, but we can't do that. So what I would like to ask for is, and I said it yesterday already, is more collaboration on this topic and even more commitment than we currently have on looking at solutions that are possibly staring us in the face, but where there are blockers, and that, in my view, would be unnecessary. Because if we can replace animal testing in one company, then why would we still use animals in another company for the same test? I think I first mentioned it 6 years ago when we were drafting the regulatory science strategy at the time. We still haven't moved in that direction. Over. Kat, you want to jump in, I can see.
I'm gonna give you a question back on that. So Ivo, so that data sharing works quite well in certain contexts, especially when we work through things like EPAA, allows companies to work together. There's a lot of sharing. Victor, there's a lot of sharing going on. It works very well. And it's true that you guys can't share data, but we do see more and more detail around the safety and efficacy aspect within EPARs. So it would be interesting for the EMA, the CVMP, based on what you know, to potentially come to us and say, we think you should look at this area, because then maybe we can trigger through EPAA, for example, a specific project in a specific area. If there's something, it's difficult as individual companies sitting there and saying which areas. So I hear the request, and I think it's maybe a request back to you. If there are particular areas you think, based on everything you're seeing, that you would suggest we ought to look at, then we can certainly look at doing that.
I guess we could do the analysis and then in an aggregated way put forward, this is where we see possibilities and opportunities. We've shied away from doing that analysis because it may bring us in a problematic situation. Having said that, EPAA is certainly a way to go. For me, it's about access to the data and how we can make those data accessible. We could work with a coalition of the willing. A number of companies that would say, yes, we subscribe to the idea in general. We open up and we want to work with the regulators to move this field forward as a start, because you have to start somewhere.
You do, and I think it's easier now to do also in the context of the more established safe harbour concept and the idea that looking back at historical data is not going to result in any reanalysis of your products, but it's this view of sharing that information to move forward. So I think that there are absolutely more opportunities, and we'd be very interested to partner with you.
And there's no lack of ideas. I saw a lot of good proposals here. The one proposal that maybe to have an annual update of guidance documents, I think that that's not something the system can handle. And the developments are not that fast that it's actually required. But we regularly updating and bringing in line with current scientific knowledge. That's of course what we are here for. Over.
Okay, very good discussions. We have one more question in the room, and then maybe I will be asking Sarah if she wants to answer the question that's online.
So I understand that the major area is the non-clinical area, but I come from generic industry, Spela from Krka, from Access VetMed, and we perform bioequivalence studies and residue studies in target animal species. So when I have to design a study with cats, dogs, or cows, I feel for them if I know that I have a refined study design, but this design would not be acceptable because it's not in the guideline. So I'm always trying to push also forward target animal species. And I haven't received the feedback yet on, I was taking opportunities of all consultation papers, and I have never received a feedback, except now in the presentation I saw that some comments were forwarded to the Efficacy Working Party and to the Safety Working Party. So I would just like to hear confirmation that target animals are not excluded from this concept of 3 Rs. Thank you.
Sarah, do you want to comment on that?
Yes, so at first, of course, target animals, the 3Rs concept applies also to target animals. I'm not sure if I understood correctly. You mean you send a comment to the reflection paper, and if that was the question, they will be answered. I do not have an answer for you now because I'm not an expert for efficacy or residues. But the comments we cannot answer in our very small drafting group, they will be sent to the working parties and they will provide answers. And then we will publish all answers to every comment we received. So I hope, I'm sorry that I cannot tell you more now, but I hope that's a bit solution. Thank you.
Thank you, yes.
Okay, something we are quite proud is that we publish all the comments that we receive to our documents, except the concept papers. But on the reflection papers and guidelines, we produce a document in which we dedicate a lot of time to answer. Sometimes the answers can be a bit brief, but we take them into account. So.
Yeah, and maybe in relation to the previous questions asking for annual updates of the documents, we do not have the ambition to do an update of the reflection paper annually, but we will regularly update we have an internal agreement to do it every 2 years. But in the meantime, we have decided to keep continuous track of innovation so that we can really update this document more easily than having it just at certain points in time.
I have a comment from Orla.
Yeah, maybe just to say, so the European Commission roadmap that Kat mentioned does envisage having a kind of a summary of research needs across the sectors, and that's proposed to be updated every 3 years. So we would feed into that as well in terms of our reflection papers. So we see that as being reflective of our research needs.
Okay, so we have had a very lively discussion. Thank you to everyone. We have 3 questions on the screen. I've been told it's 4. Let's try to answer maybe the first one that was on the screen to Sarah. I don't know if it's that too specific. Sarah, do you want to comment on this, or is that something you want to answer outside the meeting?
That is the one on the significant exposure now. That was the first before.
Correct.
Yeah. So we had really problems in the discussion, and we decided to not go for to define it not over the significant exposure, but rather on negligible exposure, because it's easier to define what negligible exposure is. And of course, liquid formulations would lead to different systemic exposures, whether they are injected accidentally or if you just have a topical exposure. But both potentially can lead to systemic exposure. So we cannot say that we have negligible exposure in these cases. So we really decided we go for negligible exposure, meaning no systemic exposure. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I can take the second one on what measures could you envision for the training of SMEs. I guess we will talk to the SME office and see if there is any opportunity to do some training on 3Rs. Okay, so the next one, it's a question about involvement with Latin America and WOHA. I don't know if anyone can answer this one.
Now, maybe I circle back to the interactions we have through the International Medicines Regulators Working Group on 3Rs. We are working together with agencies with whom the EMA has a confidentiality agreement, and we are also interacting through this group with ICMRA. And there I circle back to Orla, because maybe you have more information there. We co-chair the international group together.
In terms of the work with ICMRA, so ICMRA is the International Coalition of Medicines Regulatory Authorities, but is primarily a human regulatory group. We have been working through the international group that Sonia mentioned on a statement that that ICMRA will sort of underwrite. And we have mentioned there that though it is a human regulatory group, that the principles would also apply in some cases to veterinary medicines as well.
Kat?
I will just add to that. I touched on it very briefly, but Health for Animals are working with WOHA. We're looking at their vaccine monographs and working with Health for Animals and IABS and some other bodies. We are also focusing on Latin America, at least with regards to batch release testing, and we're actually doing a dedicated webinar with Latin America in Spanish, with Spanish and Portuguese translations, I think at the end of March. So it is a focus for industry at a Health for Animals level, where we're trying to engage with those Latin America and also WOHA. And I think if there was any opportunities where we felt that the EMA could support that, then we would certainly reach out. But it is something that certainly industry are working on.
Okay. On the last question, I believe it's a bit too general, unless someone wants to comment.
Now, the interaction with academia on 3Rs in general is done through the European Specialized Expert Community. The discussions up to now pertain mostly to the 3Rs in regulatory testing. And if we look at regulatory testing of human medicinal products and vet medicinal products, the research pops in when we talk about pharmacology. And on the work plan, we have an action point related to best practices for pharmacological testing, which is not really in guideline work. So our intention is to really give some indications of how 3Rs could be well implemented there. But on the same topic, there is a European research action that just started with respect to NAMs in biomedicine research and regulatory testing. So that will also be tackled there.
Thank you very much, Sonia. That was great. And okay, so I think we can close now, and you can go for coffee. But you already said thank you. Great presentations, great discussions, some very good ideas. So thank you very much to everyone. Thank you. Okay, so let's go for the second session. I can see that the head of the division and the chair of the CVMP.
Jordi, you need to be closer to the microphone.
Okay, I need to get closer to the micro. Colleagues, so let's start the second session. The second session is on innovation. We'll cover a broader range of topics. And I'm very pleased to introduce the first presentation on ITF. And you will see that during the last years, we have been hearing the complaints from the industry that you wanted to have more opportunities to interact with us at early stages of the marketing authorization. And we have put in place different structures, different methods in which you can do that, to the point that sometimes even inside the house it's difficult to know which is the right tool to use. But my colleague Volk will explain it to you. Dr. Volk Echman is the head of Innovation and Development Accelerator at the EMA. He is a medical doctor with a PhD in experimental medicine and a degree in European and international law. Volk is also a skier colleague of mine, but he's more German expert level and more Mediterranean survival level, but that's with that, all yours.
Thank you very much, Jordi. Good morning, colleagues. I must say I have a broken rib, so I'm not sure how experienced I am, but I'm trying my best. So today I would like to talk about the Innovation and Development Accelerator. And this encompasses a bit more even than the Innovation Task Force. But the other areas I like to bring closer to you today as well are other means of engaging with us. So I will start with the Innovation Task Force, then talk about portfolio and technology meetings, what we recently went public with, I think 2 years ago, and we have the first veterinary ones, and a couple of slides on horizon scanning, something we engage and we think becomes more and more important in the future. So, Innovation Task Force. The idea is to support drug development via early informal dialogue. And what is important is it is not only on scientific or technical aspects, it includes legal or regulatory issues. It as well prepares for more formal procedures like scientific advice. For ourselves, it helps us to address the impact of emerging therapies and prepare for these emerging trends. Ensure that if you come to us, that we are ready, that we have the right team to look at these developments. Now, at the heart of this is our briefing meetings. These are 1.5 hour discussions. They're free of charge. They're open to any applicant. And again, as mentioned, they're really informal. So the experts being in there, and we can invite any expert as long as confidentiality is ensured, are expressing their own opinion. Again, they are not only on medicines or substances, they include as well methods and technologies. And in fact, only 1/3 of them are on substances. To give you a little flavor, what has been recently discussed in terms of therapies, cell and gene, nanomedicines, bioprinted tissues. For technologies, of course, artificial intelligence is picking up, ATP manufacturing and digital technologies, and of course methods, the 3R methods, and clinical trial methodology is very high in demand. As Jordi mentioned, the veterinary briefing meetings or veterinary ITF is very active, and here just a little bit of flavor what has been recently discussed. We talked about novel insecticides derived from fungi. We talked about mesenchymal cell-based therapies, genetically modified living bacteria, and bacteriophage-based therapy for MRSA. Now, to give you a little bit more feedback in general, what kind of questions, what kind of areas we're discussing here, separated into CMC, preclinical and clinical aspects. And this analysis was around 2 years ago, and now it shifted a bit more. Maybe half of the discussions are on preclinical, and the other half is divided between CMC and clinical. So we talk about manufacturing technologies, about analytical technologies and quality aspects. And in the preclinical area, we talk about proof of concept, study design, safety talks. And in clinical, the dominant is, of course, the study design. Now, what do you get out of it? Why should you engage? Why should you put your resources on these meetings? As you can see, around 1/3 is about guidance provided, documentation, examples, etc. So really hands-on material, which helps you in your development. Another quarter, if you wish, is scientific advice, or we are asking you to seek scientific advice, to go to more formal procedure. We think you're ready to go to the next step, engaging with the regulator. We as well ask for more data before you do anything further, for example, gathering additional validation data and go to other procedures. Now I'd like to shift over to the portfolio and technology meetings. Again, 2 years ago, we went public with them, and since then, we had 3 meetings with industry stakeholder from the veterinary field. And here again, some flavor topics discussed include marine, aquaculture, parasiticides. Classification is always a big issue. It is so important for developers to choose the right region, how your product is classified, because this really determines what are the evidence requirements to put your product on the market, and we want to see them on our single market. We talk about plasmid DNA technology and the usage of antibiotic-resistant genes. These meetings are planned half a year in advance, and currently this is a call open for meetings in the second half of 2026 on our website. Now coming to my last topic, horizon scanning. What is it and why are we doing this? So for us, it is an attempt to predict trends and developments, i.e. innovation, to anticipate what changes it will bring and to prepare for it, and ideally turn it into opportunities. Now, this is a nice phrase, nice to say, and what is behind it? I think what is really different from what we see, of course, when applicants come to us, it is a proactive approach. We really look into what is out there in terms of clinical trials, in terms of publications, in terms of patents, etc. I come to this in the next slide. So why are we doing this? It informs developers, regulators, and other key stakeholders. It accelerates translation of innovation and contributes to the competitiveness as so often addressed by the Commission these days. So here a little bit idea how we do it. There's a big pot, basically. We scan literature, I think, almost on a daily basis. We look at news items, we look at third-party reports, and of course, the stakeholder interactions, funding calls from the Commission and beyond, and create signals. And these signals are then further prioritized by involving the network, experts from the vaccine committee, etc. Sorry, veterinary committee and other committees as applicable. Now to give you a bit of flavor of what we did so far. So once a topic has been identified as a priority, we draft short reports, up to 10 pages. And all these reports include challenges, opportunities, and maybe more important, recommendations. And of course, we will be measured later on. Do we translate these recommendations into something tangible? So a couple of areas where something has been published: engineered living materials, AI, of course, the NAMs, the 3 Rs on new approach methodologies, fecal microbiota transplantation, and on Alzheimer. Maybe more relevant for us today is what is upcoming, what is ongoing work. And here I like to definitely flag the one on climate change, the one on bacteriophages, and maybe the one on precision medicines. These are all in the making, and I think these definitely will affect the development of veterinary medicines. So to conclude, the Innovation Task Force is a platform for early informal dialogue on innovative medicine developments and technologies, open to everybody, free of charge. So please come with your ideas and we discuss it, how to address them in the best way. The technology meetings are more to discuss your whole portfolios and to assist you more to bring ideas in terms of portfolio management to the market or other hurdles you might see. And horizon scanning is our more proactive approach to predict trends and developments and prepare for the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Folk. That was very much to the point, a lot of information in there, and I'm sure there will be quite a few questions because people have been approaching some of us about some of those different mechanisms to consult the agency. So the next speaker is Dr. Noemi Garcia del Blanco. Noemi is the head of Biologicals and Emerging Therapies Service, and she has an extensive experience, having worked also at the VMD in the UK, where she was one of the members of the CBMP at some point before she joined us. And she has a PhD, although she doesn't mention it in her bio, but I know that, so. Noemi, all yours.
Thank you, Jordi, and good morning. Right, I think this presentation follows nicely Folk's presentation in the sense that we are referring now to novel therapies, and I hope my presentation is very straightforward in the sense that I would like you to get away from here with clear messages which are about the risk management plan for novel therapy veterinary medicinal products. And I think the messages are represented, hopefully, in this slide, which are the risk management plan is a regulatory requirement when you are going through the authorization process for a novel therapy or novel veterinary medicinal products, explain a bit the legal basis behind this, where is it coming from, these requirements, what is intended with this regulatory requirement, and how we have created some guidance for you when you are creating this document and when you have to comply with this requirement. And again, just to start from the beginning, what is a risk management plan? As I said, it's required for authorization of the veterinary medicinal products that are classified as novel therapies. And you can find, you are aware that definition of novel therapies in some cases is quite straightforward. Is directly, examples are given in the regulation. In other cases, as discussed yesterday, it's a bit more complicated. The risk management plan is not a standard pharmacovigilance. It has to focus, and it will focus on risk linked to the specific characteristics of your product, of the novel therapy, including rare, long-term, highly specific risks, as I said, beyond routine pharmacovigilance activities. And that point is quite important to understand and to remember. It should be provided by the applicant in the initial marketing authorization dossier. So the dossier should include already the risk management plan added to Part 1A. And then this will be assessed by the CVMP as part of the dossier, as part of the evaluation of the dossier. And just so you know, a summary, and I think Christina mentioned that yesterday, we will publish in the product paper once, hopefully, the product has a positive opinion. Then the legal basis behind this requirement are clearly stated in the regulation that we all know and love. And again, it's specific for novel therapies. Also, there's some reference to it in the guidance to applicants document, the Commission document. You can see there that in the specific paragraph for novel therapies, it refers to the risk management plan. So you can read there all that. So what is intended with this? The intention is to detect early or delayed signals of adverse reactions for novel therapies. And again, these therapies are by definition innovatives, and they may then have some risks that are unknown at the time of authorization. The other intention then, therefore, would be to prevent the clinical consequences of these adverse reactions and ensure timely treatment if necessary. We want to, or the idea is to gain also long-term safety and efficacy information of the novel therapy. So in summary, as you can see there, the risk management plan should focus on risk linked to the, again, specific characteristics of the novel therapy, addressing rare, long-term, or highly specific risks beyond routine pharmacovigilance. And in order to help you to comply with this, the CVMP has developed guidance with a dedicated fit-for-purpose template. So what we have done is to create a template which is, or a guidance rather, a guidance that in the form of a template. And this template, I'm not going to go through it because it's going to be published very soon. As Ivo said yesterday, hot off the press, the CVMP adopted this the final version of this document just yesterday. So there was a drafting group that had the task to draft this guidance. It composed experts from the Novel Therapies and Technologies Working Party, from the Pharmacovigilance Working Party, and some colleagues from the agency. They were busy working on this since last year, and finally, as I said, it was adopted yesterday. So this document, or this template, will be published in our website. It's going to be included in the pre-submission activities landing page of the agency. We are going to add a question in the questions and answers pre-submission activities. Is my product a novel therapy? If so, this is the, a risk management plan is required, and this is the template you can use. Of course, it's not obligatory to use, but we think it will help to guide you through I guess it's a structured way of guiding you through the thinking process of drafting a risk management plan and considerations to have into account. So what it includes is a potential or the identifications of the risks associated with the product, either confirmed and or potential. And this is based on the available data and the intrinsic characteristics of the product. Discussing any clinical consequences, early signals of adverse events that may occur, delayed adverse events that may occur, and the monitoring of the long-term safety and efficacy. Then discuss the methodology used to capture all these events and how they are going to be adequately monitored. Then there will be a consideration of the standard pharmacovigilance activities are going to be sufficient to monitor this potential risk, yes or no. If the consideration is yes, they would, then appropriate justification should be included in the risk management plan. If additional or is considered that additional pharmacovigilance activities or risk minimization measures are needed, then provide justifications of this and how the shape, the methodology used, whatever is necessary to give a full picture of risk, how going to be monitored and measures put in place to do so. Then you will see in the document that there are some. There's an annex at the end of the document that includes some examples, and again, there are examples for a specific type of products, some examples for stem cells, for bacteriophages, for nanotechnologies, and I think gene therapy have been added as guidance and as to help in the thinking process. Considering, yes, again, the available data, preclinical data, clinical data, but then also the characteristics of the product, the composition, the manufacturing process, the mode of action, the administration, and others that can be considered to assess the risk. And finally, some general points for consideration for you. First, again, this is a regulatory requirement, so you should be convinced that your product is a novel therapy. So is my product a novel therapy? Again, sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's not that easy. So we would recommend you, in any doubt, please request for classification. Or we are also going to include a question on is my product a novel therapy in the eligibility request form for the centralized procedure and also for a pre-submission meeting request. As a reminder, when you are planning all your activities, pre-authorization activities, that has to be considered because it has consequences, not only for data requirements, but for instance, the risk management plan, because the dossier should include it already. Then be concise when listing identified or potential risks. We would like to see a clear, a plan of overview of the risk and the measures that are going to be put in place to minimize this risk. Ensure all the information, of course, scientific, non-promotional. Have into account, obviously, that this is a guidance document in the shape of a template, as I said, so it's non-exhaustive and is intended as flexible guidance. So some of the information added there would be applicable and relevant for your product. Some information is not going to be. So you choose what you need and consider appropriate for your specific product. Because again, the requirements should be adapted to the specific product. And just to repeat again, because I guess it's the most important part, focus on those risks that are rare, long-term, highly specific to the category of the novel therapy, and the standard pharmacovigilance already covers continuous monitoring. So the measures that go beyond a standard measure already in place. And we are here, we recognize that this is quite a new thing, I guess, requirement for all parts, for you as industry and for the experts. And hopefully this guidance will help both. And we are, the agency are very happy, or would be very happy to help and clarify if needed. So contact us in any doubt. And that was all from me. Thank you very much.
Okay, so we are going really fast through the through the program. Well, you know, risk management plans are new for us, and I must say I never expected how those three words will complicate quite a lot our life on the veterinary division, and I guess that there will be a lot of questions about it. What I also notice is that because we publish a template, we don't provide you the opportunity to comment as we usually do with other documents. But of course, you can always ask or send us questions to Ask EMA, and we will be looking at those and improve what it is, in fact, a template. So template can be easily changed, and we will try to update it as needed. So let's go to the last presentation, in fact, of the day, which is going to be presented by my colleague, Martin. You know, it's on the open initiative. Martin is going to present you on the human side experience on this initiative. Martin, you need to know that, and maybe you're aware about that years ago, already the industry, they were talking about the 111 initiative. Do you remember that? That
sounds painfully close.
It was the one dossier, one assessment, one decision.
Indeed.
I think the one decision...
The one-stop shop.
The one-stop shop. We are not there, but I can tell you that I heard from colleagues that on the human side, there is more involvement of other authorities into the assessment process, and that maybe on the vet side we can learn a lot about what they are doing on the human side. And I hope you will clarify some of those points. Thank you.
I'll have a go. Good morning, and welcome to continuation of all.
Sorry, Martin, I didn't introduce you. You're the head of international affairs at the EMA. Thank you.
So yes, like Jordi, I'm a veteran of this place. So my name is Martin Harvey. I'm head of international affairs here at the European Medicines Agency. The agency has quite a wide range of international engagements right across many global partners, most of which we do alongside DG Santé, the European Commission, and other services of the European Commission, and we may get onto that a little bit later. Probably one of the most frequent, and this should not be a surprise to anybody in the room, our most frequent partner is the US Food and Drug Administration, the US FDA. And despite the headlines that you may have been reading over the past year or so, just wanted to reassure you that we have continued to maintain close cooperation with the US FDA. I'm very pleased to tell you that the first staff exchange, the first fellowship we've managed to achieve since our relocation to the Netherlands and post-COVID was actually with the veterinary division of the agency and the Centre for Veterinary Medicines at the US FDA. So the veterinary medicines part of our international relations is actually a very important part of the international program. And it was really important opportunity for the CMV and for the veterinary colleagues to have this moment to reconnect and rebuild the relationships that perhaps we hadn't focused on so much during the COVID times. So I wanted to give you that example as something that it's very important, the veterinary aspects of our international engagements. We sort of as we were sort of just hinting at there, we're doing a lot of work on the human medicine side to look at how can we reinforce international collaboration and reliance work. And for us, we see this as quite an important part of the way we want to change the way we do our business. And it was made clear to us during COVID when it became clear to many international regulators that no regulator, regardless of how well resourced you are, can do it all by themselves. And yes, you can look at the US FDA and the European Medicines Agency and some of the other regulators. We are fortunate to be in a position of being fairly well resourced, but there are many regulators around the world that do not have that capacity and the level of resources we have. And so they're increasingly work around how can we find collaboration pathways and reliance pathways. And one way that we're currently working on the human medicine side is trying to build reliance in post-approval changes. And so industry tells us constantly that That's the initial marketing authorization. Yes, that's a lot of work, and it's a lot of work for industry and regulators the same. But the majority of work goes on in the post-approval space. And so we are currently running a pilot together with the WHO, and there's no reason why we shouldn't be thinking about the possibility with the World Organization for Animal Health on the other side, trying to work pilots, and we're currently running 34 of them, because I signed off the 34th letter yesterday, for where the opinion of the CHMP is then being leveraged by other regulators around the world to implement post-approval changes without additional assessment. And so we've actually managed on the human side to something like almost 80 different regulators around the world in different countries for quite a large number of products. Within 6 months are approving post-approval changes that might take 2, 3+ years. And so we're really trying to leverage the work we do here and share that impact. And we're trying this in different configurations we know this supports us, it supports other regulators, and we know it also supports industry, and importantly also supports continuity of supply. If you're maintaining multiple manufacturing sites, particularly in the CMC space, multiple manufacturing sites, multiple supply chains for different products, we know that has costs, financial costs and health costs. And so it's very much central to the work we do on the international team, working closely with our colleagues in the Human Medicines Division and the Veterinary Medicines Division. I've been asked to present one specific pathway, which is in the initial marketing authorization space. And it glories under the name of open, which I think also reflects the DNA, the approach that we have here at the European Medicines Agency of being open to collaboration and open to reliance with our partners. And this is very much on the human medicine side for the moment, and we may want to reflect on the possibility to extend elsewhere. So EMA has a number of confidentiality arrangements jointly signed by EMA and DG Santé with regulators around the world. And the open pathway is currently operating with Health Canada, Anvisa Brazil, Swissmedic, TGA Australia, PMDA Japan, and MFDS in South Korea, as well as the World Health Organization. And we initially started this off during COVID, when every COVID vaccine and every COVID therapeutic was assessed with the additional expertise and input from these other regulators, in particular from the World Health Organization. And it proved to be a very successful way of sharing the expertise. And it's also about insourcing. So it's not about outsourcing the responsibility of our partners. For us, it's also about insourcing expertise and sharing the expertise and sharing the knowledge. So this is very much part of the ethos of what we're trying to do. The success during COVID meant that we were able to expand it, and this has been done together with the support, with the approval of our management board, actually in this very room, but that's another story. It's now open to any products that responds to the antimicrobial resistance. Any of our priority medicines for unmet medical needs, and for any medicines, vaccines for public public health emergency threats. This is primarily targeting initial marketing authorizations, but we're beginning to pilot some post-approval changes, and we can talk about that in a moment. But you can see the reach we're doing with these partners. We have 2 particular programs running, where we are involving regulators from countries with whom we do not have confidentiality arrangements. Now, this is being done because under open, it is driven by the companies. So it is the companies that select which regulators they want to be part of this. It is the companies that explicitly consent to share commercial confidential information. These are the companies that consent to the participation of these regulators in the CHMP discussions. And so the issues around commercial confidentiality and the issues around personal data protection are those for the company to respond to. So I sort of covered some of this. It's about the open framework is intended to share the expertise and tackle the common challenges. There are no diseases which only affect one region or only one country. We are all facing, and that's also particularly interesting on the veterinary side as well. There are many common challenges, and we know that science is not we do not pretend to have a monopoly on science here at the EMA, and it's always good to be able to leverage and bring in the expertise from colleagues. It does, we find, help speed up access to new therapies, particularly for other regulators who might not necessarily have applications for new medicines and the same time frame as the applications come into the EMA. And so by encouraging near synchronized applications to the EMA and to other regulators, it also promotes access to new therapies and access to markets. And we do look to harmonize the approaches. While there's no obligation of our partners to adopt exactly the same opinion as the CHMP, the effect is that we do actually achieve a large amount of consensus, and we also work to reduce the number of questions that companies receive from the different regulators. So we're looking to make sure and facilitate and streamline the process for companies. It also streamlines the process for our partners as well. So the principles, I seem to have done the entire presentation already in the first slide, so I apologize for that one. But we do, one of the things we try to do is that when a company does elect to go through the open pathway, is that the other regulators do align with the timetable of the CHMP. And so again, this is all part of streamlining the process. And so the company involved and the other regulators know that they must align with the timetables that are established from the outset, and it's a really important part of the process. The other regulators, in the same way that the CVMP or the CHMP around the table, there's a rapporteur and a co-rapporteur, and the other committee members are providing input. The partner regulators can provide input on almost as any other member states. And so they are very much in process and can participate, can ask questions, and engage and contribute to the committee discussions. And there's actually, we find that very powerful and very useful for that. Given that some of the colleagues are in Canada and Australia and Japan, sometimes it's not always terribly convenient time-wise, but that doesn't seem to impact. People do join and they do connect, which is it's always good to see. And we are trying to really work on the non-duplication of lists of additional questions when we have the list of questions. And so when the questions come out from TGA Australia or Health Canada or Swissmedic, we try to make sure there's as much overlap as possible, but if there are specific questions relating to that jurisdiction, they are labelled and highlighted as being specific, and so they can be handled separately. The only thing where the partner regulators do not participate in is the final benefit risk decision. That is for the EMA committee to take, because they're taking the opinion on behalf in terms of the marketing authorization recommendation for the European Union. And so the experts from our open partners don't participate in that. They are free to take their own decision. They maintain responsibility for their own decision in that. But we do find it a very useful process. Communication, the whole thing is important. And so we do share, and companies who come into the open process, they are made aware of this. The list of questions, the assessment reports are all shared with the partner regulator during the open process. So this is there's a level of transparency which many regulators don't have. And the other thing in terms of the variation space is that the EMA produces assessment reports for variations that many other regulators do not produce. And so that has also been found to be incredibly useful for other regulators to be able to share in our work, because there is an assessment report that they can refer to. We do expect our partners to explicitly say in their decisions and in their communications that they'd worked with the EMA as part of the open pathway. We need industry to actually step up and engage, which is really the call to action to industry when I have these sorts of discussions, is that we have designed this pathway around the needs of industry at the request of industry, and industry now has to start using it. They have to put it into their filing strategy, into their development plans, that if they do want to submit, not just in Europe, but in Australia and Switzerland, Canada, wherever, that they do actually plan for this proactively. And you can see what we have up here. We have all the COVID vaccines therapeutics. We currently have about 4 new marketing authorization applications going through open, and we also have the first type 2 variation that's going through. It's a mix of vaccines and therapeutics, and so far we worked with Brazil, Japan, Switzerland, and the WHO. And in just terms of the impact, that all bar one of the COVID-19 vaccines, the WHO emergency listing, emergency use approval by WHO, was based on the CHMP, on the EMA assessment. And the data we have suggests that the WHO was able to leverage our assessment, because of our transparency and the openness in the way that we work, to about 160 countries. The WHO leveraged the EMA assessment to 160 countries. So this was the wake-up call for us when we suddenly realized the value of what the committees here at the agency can do, because of the way we operate and the transparency we offer. And that's about it. There are links. These slides will be shared with you. These are links. They will take you through to the Q&A. The Q&A is almost like a work instruction. We try to put out a playbook. It describes how it works. I would encourage you to read it. And there is a place to send questions if you have any comments on the playbook and the procedure and the pathway. But the message is from the European Medicines Agency is that we are absolutely committed to collaboration and reliance and working with our international partners. And it's in our DNA, and it's the way we work. And as you said, we've been working on the 111 one-stop shop idea for many years, and it's still there. It's still part of our DNA. Thank you.
And thank you very much. Before I open the floor for questions to the 3 sessions, maybe just to manage a bit the expectations about the presentation from Martin, just to be clear. We've heard what they are doing on the human side. We are very interested into the veterinary division. I will say, well, I think you can confirm that we are obviously smaller, and we need, as the sector, and we need to look at it carefully and see how we can approach it. There are a few hubs that we need to jump, including the legal considerations, approval from the Commission, etc. But that seems really, really innovative, and I'm glad that this is presented at this session. And it looks very exciting, if you allow me, the possibility to do something like that. So we have plenty of time for discussion, which I'm happy. So let's start. Competition.
I know, and for Martin, I'm Kat Sterling from Zoetis. Really interesting to hear about the open framework. We were very keen to know what you were going to say about it. And I think the way things are moving internationally, we've seen Canada now working on a reliance program, etc. And I would very much echo what you said about the value of the assessment reports that CVMP, CHMP produce. And I think they do bring value, and we've certainly with agreement, shared them with international regulators, which has helped procedures. So even without your current open procedure, your assessment reports have been very useful for us. I think, at least from our side, we would be very interested if there was further discussion on the possibility of even just starting with the post-approval changes and reliance type approaches. The open framework is certainly a very interesting possibility. Obviously, it would only be suitable for certain products, etc. But the idea of those shared assessments, etc., access to products globally faster is all very positive. And I think it would also help in the context of more consistent approvals and consistent labels around the world, which is becoming more and more of an issue with the global information. And it would be very interesting to explore it. So only just a positive comment that I think that we would be very interested to see how that could work in the future if it's something we could do. And going back to the previous session about 3Rs, I think we talked about the fact that it can sometimes take us sort of 4 to 5 years to get a post-approval change approved globally. And if there was some mechanism to do that and sharing assessment, I think even in the context of the 3R side of things, it would allow us to move faster. So more of a positive comment than a question.
Thank you. Okay, let's start there. Yeah.
Hello, this is Mónica Escalada from Zoetis. It's very much aligned with Katrina's comment. I think what we are seeing is a very increased reliability on CVMP's assessment globally. So as an EMA holder and in initial marketing authorization applications, we are seeing more and more global agencies requesting for CVMP's assessment. Not to say that VMD is also asking for CVMP assessment reports. So as Katrina said, I think we are asking EMA for authorization or acceptance for us of sharing those assessment reports. Is there any view or recommendation from the agency on this aspect? Because I think before it was somehow occasional, and at the moment we are getting blocked on the progress of some procedures unless we are providing CVMP assessment reports. Thank you.
My quick answer to that was share the CVMP assessment reports. They are, the one thing I would caveat is share the final CVMP assessment report. Please do not share, because what we see, particularly on the human side, sort of the interim assessment reports create a lot of confusion. They don't help you as a company, and they don't help the partner regulator, and they don't help us. So the final assessment reports.
I cannot agree more with that, and I'm very happy if we can get a position from the agency on that aspect, because we have strongly pushed back to some agencies based in Europe, not in the EU, I won't say the name, and they are strongly insisting that we share the interim assessment reports from the rapporteurs, which I think is not the right thing to do, because there's a lot of, there's not a final decision made at that point. So I would really appreciate to have some position from the agency on that, because we are really put in the corner by some agencies, and that is really blocking the progress of procedures. Thank you.
Okay, no, I think that indeed I can't think of any formal objection why you should not share the final assessment report, because the information in there is basically about your product and about how a global regulator sees your product. But I do think that we need to set some rules here, and I would like to go back to legal and indeed see what we can do. I think there should be a very strict ban on sharing anything that is related to the decision-making process itself. Not because we don't want to be transparent, because I do appreciate that the CVMP assessment report is of such high quality that you can use it indeed in getting access to other markets. I think that's a real plus for us. It was setting a benchmark in that way for what global regulators should deliver. But we're very strict about not having anyone interfere, and I think that would be my real concern, with the actual decision-making process that we have here in-house. So up until the final opinion, because it's an opinion of the committee, it's been followed by a decision of the Commission. So what you get in your assessment report is an opinion on risk, benefit and quality, as you all know. How we get there, that is, I think, a well-designed process. It's predictable timeline. There's a high predictability in the type of questions that we can ask. We're working on optimizing that as well. But I would really think it would be unacceptable if that was shared outside and people try to influence that decision-making process. That would be my real concern. So yes, you can expect from us a formal position on that, which we have to liaise with our internal legal affairs commission and I think CVMP chair and the CVMP.
No, thank you. Just to add on that, I haven't seen in the examples we have had that. So it is, I haven't seen any attempt to interfere with the European process. It's more that they are just waiting to take any further step until they receive further information from the European procedure.
But apparently there's an interest in receiving interim assessment reports. So.
Okay, so, well, thank you very much for your comment. You can bring as many as you want on those on the table. I know that the CVMP is happy with your comment. I'm personally very happy also. You know, we work very hard to produce those reports, and it's great that you find it of use. So we had a question here.
Yeah, Cornelia Allen from MSD Animal Health. So a little bit in the light of what was already said. So innovation for me, it's not only about new products or new technology, it's also about smarter way of collaboration, especially as a lot of companies are working globally. And I'm very pleased to hear about the Reliance, which I realized is not well known within the veterinary sector. And there is already a good Reliance practice established by WHO. And there is quite some experience on the human side. And Reliance is much more than sharing assessment reports. It's also about inspection reports and anything else. So there is, for me, this is a nice, smart way of regulation. And I'm wondering if the veterinary sector will also, because I know on the human side, EMA is very supportive here, very active. If something similar will happen on the veterinary side as well. Thank you.
Martin? Okay.
Yes, I think it's
No, I think for those of you that attended the VICH conference, which was in November 2024 here at the agency, I completely agree with you. When I touched upon my vision for the future on innovation, I included regulatory innovation there as well. One of the parts of regulatory innovation is more globalization and looking at internationalization and working more amongst regions. And that has several elements, and we can learn a lot from the human initiatives. I think I'm the master of expectation management in this info day. When you look at the map, the elegant first slide that Martin showed on how the Open Initiative works, you see the different regulatory authorities in the different regions, Australia, Asia, Japan, Korea, South America. Some of them have a responsibility for veterinary medicinal products. Most of them don't. Health Canada has, but whether or not in the confidentiality agreement that there is in relation to the Open Initiative, veterinary medicines are included, that would largely dictate how we can work. I know Swissmedic, also with the responsibility of veterinary medicinal products, it could be relatively easy to look into that, but that's not necessarily the market you're interested in. So before we engage fully in these programs, I think, as Martin said, we would like to understand how the industry sees this, and we would need to understand how we can set it up and which would be the main partners. So, for WHO has a different role in, let's say, approving medicines for global use than FAO has. And FAO is trying to build programs to support that. So Are they a logical partner? VOA is not necessarily involved in assessment. So to find the strategic partners for developing these global initiatives, we already have our connection to FDA CVM. I see the top question here on collaboration with Canadian Animal Health and the US FDA. Martin mentioned the fellowship that one of our staff members did a month ago to the United States FDA CVM. In connection with that fellowship, what he did before he went to the FDA is he spent 2 days at the United States Department of Agriculture CVB. It's been my long-standing wish to establish a similar relationship with CVB. Under the previous director, there was no interest from the side of CVB to do that. Then came a new director who has an interest, very enthusiastic with the idea. Then came the new administration in the United States, which makes it really complicated to set up anything at this moment. But that first informal visit and the contacts we have during VICH look promising for the future. But we are not alone in the driving seat for establishing confidentiality agreements. You've mentioned the MRA on GMP, and those things take a long time, and it's Commission that is in the driving seat for that. We can indicate where we see needs, and that's what we're doing. And then let's hope that that materializes somewhere in the future, because that would be a good basis for, let's say, collaboration, information sharing, and for better regulatory outcome for all of us. That's where I'd like to end it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Maybe to add also that we have last year revamped the parallel scientific advice with the FDA. And in fact, we're having a meeting, a bilateral with the FDA on Monday, and we are going to be talking and going to be presenting about, exploring the possibility also of go beyond that and, consider if we could do a simultaneous review of marketing authorizations. It's all very draft, but we're really exploring into those directions. And the clusters, yes, we have the clusters, obviously, with the FDA. That's been going. It's been going on for so many years that we can sometimes forget. We have one cluster with the FDA on innovation, another one in pharmacovigilance, and those are very active. So Jutta had a question. I can see she's looking at the watch also, so you might as well want to ask a question now.
Thank you. My name is Jyoti. I'm from Association of Veterinary Consultants. My question is, Martin, how do you select your open partners? What are the criteria for selection?
The current partners are those with whom we have confidentiality undertakings, arrangements, as Ivo just suggested. We are running 2 pilots. We seem to do a lot of pilots here. I don't know, but we've got two pilots running at the request of the companies, I have to say, that both involve regulators with whom we do not have confidentiality arrangements. These are very much pilots. And so the company has selected the regulator, the regulators in question, and we're looking to see how this works, because we've never had this sort of level of engagement with a partner with whom we don't have a confidentiality arrangement. My personal take on confidentiality arrangements is they take an awfully long time to negotiate. They can be rather cumbersome and slow. So we're looking at alternative ways of something a little bit more agile. So we're looking at how this works, or it doesn't. Then just looking if it's actually worth the additional workload that it requires. But anyway, that's it. And then we sort of come back to Ivo's points about USDA and some not all confidentiality arrangement partners include veterinary medicines. Even when they do, like the one we have with US FDA, it's not all veterinary medicines, and so that adds a further level of complexity. I hope that helps.
Good morning, everyone. PJ Seren from Animal Health Europe. I have a couple of questions. They should be fairly quick to answer, but I will group them so to make it easy. With regards to and they're all tied to the open process, to be honest. With regards to the alignment, so the the invited stakeholders or the invited national authorities that are part of it, they have to align on the timeline. They are not part of the benefit risk assessment, but does that also lead to an accelerated approval, or there's no engagement with regards to approval delays or approval times in those respective regions? So that's my first question. My second question is with regards to timelines. I heard that it is linked to the legal approval from the European Commission. I would assume that it is on the principle, not on specific projects. But is there any idea of a timeline on when something could be launched on the veterinary side? And then my final question, if the definitions of the scope that would be possible, if it would be before publishing or deciding on them to consult animal health industry?
I'll take the first grouped question and the third one, and I think the timelines I'll leave for Ivo and his expectation management skills. So you spoke about the timelines for approvals. I can't give you a specific answer. Does it accelerate? One thing I will say, though, is what it can do, particularly for regulators in smaller sized markets. The fact of having the companies submitting in their jurisdiction at the same time as submitting in the European Union means that that application comes in the first wave or the second wave rather than the third or fourth wave. And so in terms of the accelerating access to the market and availability, you accelerate that. In terms of the actual specific timeline for approvals, sometimes it has, sometimes it hasn't. But in one rather embarrassing case, one of the open partners was actually managed to get the approval before we did. But that was a timeline thing. On the third thing about the scope, if you go back to the original open pathway when the management board approved it, it did actually say that we would explore extension to the veterinary medicines. So that was the original management board decision, said that. We didn't seem there was a lot of appetite for it, and so we didn't take that much further. But it's something that's certainly with EVO we can take away and reflect together with the European Commission in terms of how we take that forward. In terms of the consultation point, the current version, the current iteration of Open was designed with the explicit and express input and from the human medicines industry. As well as from our open partners as well. So it was a co-designed pathway. And by co-designing it, that also puts the responsibility back onto industry to use it. Okay? You always complain, oh, you regulators, you create these incredible pathways and you never ask us about it. Well, but this time, every single part of the open pathway has been designed and delivered everything industry asks us for. And so this allows me the rather delicious ability to knock industry on the head every meeting I go to talk about open, because the ball is entirely in their side of the court. Ivo, expectation management.
The open initiative on the human side, my understanding is it was accelerated enormously under COVID. And I think that was the trigger that really saw everybody coming together and saying, if we can accelerate access to the market or availability to the people of COVID vaccines or COVID therapeutics worldwide by this initiative, then we should do it. And that's really what triggered it, and it showed that it worked. I'm not saying we need a similar crisis on the veterinary side, but that pressure is simply not there. And I don't think avian influenza is strong enough to bring that sort of pressure. So without COVID, I would say that it would have taken years. But we have the example. But I would think years in terms of really getting it up and running, because finding the right global partners, setting up the confidentiality agreements, we have to build the system in principle, making it suitable for the different types of products that we have on the market. Where should we have our focus? Because it will be new products where it is of interest. So there will be novel, innovative products or novel vaccines. we know it's a complicated area to deal with in any way. So to then having to deal with it with other regulators, which may have different views on these type of products. And we've seen that, for example, with FDA CVM on stem cells, where they clearly have different interpretations of what they see and what the usability is and how they perceive safety issues or efficacy issues. That will further complicate it. So even if we're able to set it up, expectation management again, I think the complexity of the area where it will be really useful will require a lot of work and a lot of input. But if we start now, a few years, not before my retirement, Pieter Jan.
Just to sort of tag on to what Ivo just said there, because I'm listening to this thinking actually, in terms of your interactions, it feels, and a little bit what Martin said, that the drivers coming from industry, that it feels like it's something we ought to be discussing at kind of health for animals level around what we'd like to see, and to be then communicating with some of those international agencies from an industry point of view saying, we would like you to talk to the EMA about this, and I'm not going to say which ones right now, it's something we'll need to talk about, but it feels like we ought to think about that if it's something we want to see happen, to have that conversation and to think about those messages through our international regulatory agencies and partners in different countries, to have that, if you think that would help grease the wheels of the conversation.
I think it would help to have a clear position from the industry, preferably global industry, because I think, you know, in Europe we're okay. We're the benchmark, I would say, for a lot of these things, so yeah, no, it has to be from the global level.
Okay, so we have.
Just one comment.
Okay, go for it.
Sorry, you were referring to novel therapies, but before you were also discussing the possibility of post-approval changes to be globally acceptable via open, which is not novel therapy.
No, but the context in which it was mentioned was, for example, alternatives to animal experiments, 3Rs, where, again, you know, if we could have a global vision on that, it would make it easier. So, I don't want to just dump. I don't think we can just dump products in there and then say post-approval to be organized. There must be a good reason to do it, because it will be a time investment as well from regulators as well as from industry. So the benefit needs to be identified clearly.
Okay, I'd like to give an opportunity to also ask questions to Volk and Noemi. Noemi, there is I see the third question there that I don't know if it's so much for you or for also Christina here from Regulatory Affairs. So
I can take it and then you can complement. Yes, so I would say that the classification of a product as novel therapy is a classification criteria based on the innovative characteristic of the product, but any product is going to be either biological, non-immunological, immunological, biological, or non-biological. So those are the three classifications based on the type of product. But then I would say the novel therapy is an additional label to that product. So that means that it's innovative, and the definition in the regulation gives some examples of them. And then we have, of course, the famous the ISM field that it has to be case by case. So we have this classification procedure where you can send us a form, and the form includes, is my product a biological, is not a biological, is not immunological, and in addition to that, it has an additional question saying, and is my product a novel therapy? So you may well know that your product is already immunological, but you want to know if it's also novel therapy, and you can use the same form to ask that, or for both, because you are not sure if it's immunological or biological, not immunological. Sometimes it's not that clear. So, yeah, and in fact, when we send you the outcome of the classification, we're going to tell you it is a biological, and in addition, be aware that it's a novel therapy. And now we will include something saying, and therefore, a risk management plan will be needed. I hope it clarifies. Yeah?
Yeah, it's exactly as Noemi said. There is a definition of a novel therapy in the regulation. It's in Article 443, and it lists and includes also the nascent field, which is obviously the open one, but the rest are quite specific and clear what can be a novel therapy. But of course, it can be any of the categories, as Noemi just explained. Thank you.
Okay, so we have, thank you very much for this clear answer. Yes.
The second, yes, about the consultation, because I think Jordi said before, but it was missed. There won't be a consultation process for the template, and I guess it's for two reasons. One is that it's not a guideline; it's a template stroke guidance, and again is to help the thinking process. And second, because if there was a consultation process, it would take a long time, and we are aware that this is needed, as soon as possible, and we wanted to publish as soon as possible. So those are the reasons.
Okay, I can see. Oh, there was a question about risk management plan, but has disappeared. Okay, there is I can see the first question in there. What level of engagement has there been for 3Rs methods in ITF brief meetings? I don't know if you want to answer this one, Folk.
Yes, I can. Yeah, thank you. And I can start with the first two questions, actually. So in 3Rs, we have seen a massive engagement on the human side in the last 1 or 2 years. Now, why are we doing all this? In the end, we really want to reduce animal testing, and we are not there yet. So one thing is they come early engagement with the regulator. The next thing is, we have this qualification process, and I think there we are now drafting the first opinions. But in the end, we really want to see product developments which do not use these methods. And so it's more, I just discussed it with Sonia, I think our reference in Europe for 3Rs, it's more marathon than a sprint, and we're really looking forward to more applications. Coming to your question, we haven't seen any from the veterinary side specific on the 3R. So it's rather a plea or engagement, please come to us. The other questions maybe I can take very quickly. Yes, the platform and technology meeting are absolutely open to the veterinary side. We have around 20 per year, and 3 out of the 20 last year were on veterinary, which is quite a high proportion considering the industry in itself. So this is running very well, and we're very open to continue that.
Any question from the room? Otherwise, we can answer, maybe colleagues can answer the first one about the risk management plan as a support management of risk for products registered under other legal basis.
I can start, and then maybe my colleagues from pharmacovigilance can continue, or Christina. So yes, risk management plan already existed, and they have been used to support the authorization of other type of products that are non-novel therapies, and they have been used in the past. I guess the difference is that in that case, a risk management plan is usually either asked by the CBMP after the assessment of the dossier, because some, gaps, let's say, are identified that need to be confirmed in the long term, for instance, for long-term efficacy of the product, for example. Or the company may propose it again after, the assessment, usually towards the end, of the assessment phase. And the difference is that for novel therapies, the risk management plan is already a requirement that has to be included in the initial dossier. So it has to be submitted with the dossier because it's based again in the basis that the product is innovative, and therefore it may, let's say, have some risks that are unknown based on the specific characteristics in the product, because there's no experience with, let's say, that kind of product in the veterinary field, and there are some aspects that have to be addressed. Something else that you would like to say, Christina?
Thank you. Just to make the distinction, on the human side, there is a distinct legal basis for RMPs for all products. We just have different legislation. And as Noemi said, on our side, we have a legal basis for the applicants to have to submit and for us to have to assess an RMP only for novel therapies. Yes, there have been cases where we have used them also for other products, also before the new legislation, but there are different legal bases here. So there's definitely no intention to introduce them for all kinds of products, but they have to be present in the dossier of novel therapies. Thank you.
Okay, just to comment that I think you mentioned we have had risk management plan before, but We have very few of those. Very few, one or two, I think. Okay. What questions do we have left to answer? Do you want to answer the second one about India and China? Don't look so excited.
Sorry, did I sigh before I put the microphone on?
You can just say no, Martin.
Expectation management. It depends. This very much comes back to the confidentiality arrangements. At the moment, we do not have confidentiality arrangements with the Indian authorities nor with the Chinese authorities. I don't expect that the European Commission will engage with confidentiality arrangements with either of those partners at the current moment. So,
no.
I've still, despite all these years, I've still not really adapted to the Dutch way of just being completely direct. So I was just trying to be polite to the person who asked that question. Okay, if the answer is no.
You are too British, Martin.
Okay. Yes, they are large markets. But do you know what? Work with them. Share the CVMP assessment report with those regulators and say, this is what the EMA has done with my products. Very happy. And they said, you can share the tell them we gave full permission to share the assessment report, submit it as part of your dossiers in India and in China. That's the answer, okay? Over. So I've slightly nuanced my the no, but
I'm not sure if that's the answer that colleagues were waiting for.
That's the answer we're giving.
Yeah, that's the answer we are giving. Very true. Okay, the two questions that I see on the screen, I think we have been, dealing around those, so I don't think we need to answer those. So I'm ready to close the session.
Can I give one other? The fact that we have, just to recognize here, so we're talking about India and China, but let's come closer to home. We have with us today 6 representatives from EU candidate country regulators here in the room, and to say welcome to the colleagues. We are, the agency does operate something called the Instrument for Pre-Accession Assistance, and this under this program, together with working with the European Commission, it is about aligning the regulatory systems of EU candidate countries with the EU acquis communautaire. And so we are working on our side, and we're already beginning to involve the veterinary agencies of the candidate countries in some of the CVMP working parties and in some of our work, the training and other activities. There is a counterpart responsibility on industry to begin reflection about aligning of dossiers. So we know already the European Commission is opening the accession treaty negotiations with one of the 10 candidate countries, but there will be others. And so this is an opportunity for you as industry to begin reflection within your companies to align the dossiers of the EU dossiers with the dossiers you have in the candidate countries. So please do reflect on that. You will need to do it at some point. So think about the opportunities of leveraging the moments as you prepare for example, Montenegro, and do it for all of the other candidate countries. That's a little strategic discussion for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. I think that was a very important point that sometimes I have the feeling we are forgetting about the accessing countries. I don't know why, but...
Well, we have Montenegro, but also on the 29th of August, put it in your diaries, ladies and gentlemen, 29th of August, Iceland is having a referendum about EU membership.
Yep.
And given that Iceland, Norway and Liechtenstein are already fully engaged and aligned with the EU acquis and part of the CVMP, that may be a rather quick accession process. So there are lots of opportunities for you as industry to begin thinking about how within the European neighbourhood you think about your supply chains, your marketing authorizations, and beginning to align, because that also has an impact on shortages and all sorts of other other operational aspects of you as companies. Over.
Okay, so with this final remark, if there are no more questions, I'm happy to close the second session of this morning. I think that was a great session. Thanks to the 3 speakers. It worked very well. And before I pass the mic to Ivo to do the final remark, maybe to mention that I'm very pleased how this morning's session went. I think that some of the discussions were truly interesting, that I personally did not miss all those long discussions on implementing and delegating acts or the UPD. And obviously it's because it works beautifully and you're all happy with it, and the variation require an assessment, the ones not requiring assessment. So this is, honestly, I'm happy to be looking at the future, what things we can do to improve how the whole sector works. And also to see the feeling of understanding between the 3 Rs, what the regulators want and what the industry wants to achieve, and having heard some good proposals that came out of it, and that it's an area that we all want to progress. That really makes me happy in the sense that I can see that we are working in the direction of promoting the agency's mission, which is at the end of the day promoting animal and public health. As a last remark, you see the screen in the screen that you can vote. I guess that you can join the Slido and then vote. If you have, there is something you don't like, looking at the threes there, please write also in the comments what it is. If you love it, please vote for a 5. Ivo, I guess you're going to say the thank you, but nevertheless, thank you to colleagues.
No, thank you very much, Jordi. And my duty to bring you the closing remarks. Let me start by thanking all the speakers that we've seen over the past 2 days. And I will start now by thanking my support team here in the back, because I always forget that at the end of it. So they've been running the show for you. Today we had real issues. Today it started with real issues on people not being able to connect to the Teams link, and apparently that's in Teams. We used to run it in WebEx before, and then it was never a problem. But I'm happy to say that over 300 people were redirected through the website and could still listen in remotely. So yesterday we had over 500 people remotely connected, and it's good. And the whole session has been recorded, so if people have missed it, they can look it back. But I can tell you, without that support team, nothing would work. Not only technically here in the room, but also in organizing the program, getting the speakers here, liaising, making sure that the speakers know what's expected from them, and I hope we've brought you an interesting program, something that clearly was different from what we did last year when we had the Innovation Day. And as Jordi mentioned, we're finally coming loose from the implementation of Regulation 2019/6, flawlessly moving into a new Biotech Act, which was the first topic we put on the agenda yesterday. I'd like to thank the Commission for clarifying some of those things in the Biotech Act, because from the legal text itself, not everything was clear, and I hope that interpretation that was given stands and is robust enough to survive the trilogue. Also, very thankful for the feedback of industry on the Biotech Act, because I think we're all doing our analysis on that and see where can it bring benefits and where can it really help us in innovation on top of the measures we've already had in the in 2019/6. I missed the part on the pharmacovigilance, but I'm sure that must have generated some lively discussions yesterday, because we've made major changes last year in the way we approach signal management. Still a lot of work to be done. I'm pretty sure that there's room for improvement. And I understand that the Commission is considering also looking into that for the near future. Yesterday highlights the regulatory and procedural developments, the CVMP work plan for 2026 and beyond, but certainly also the update from Damien Bouchard, chair of the CVMP ADRA temporary working party, on the ADRA project, which has generated a lot of attention, which holds promises for the future, and which we would all like to see being brought to a good end. This morning, I was really impressed with the progress made by the 3Rs Working Party, the commitment of the industry, and I think it holds hope for the future in that we can further progress this area, even though it may receive more attention on the human side. I think there is really a solid basis for advancing this also on the veterinary side. And having that insight from both regulators and industry in one session, in less than an hour and a half, we were able to cover a lot of topics and have a good discussion. So it shows, I think, the value of these info days very much, that focusing on specific topics and just giving, what is the state, where are we, how do we see the way forward is really, really useful investment of our time. And then after the break, innovation. Falk, thank you very much for bringing your presentation. And then what I said yesterday already, freshly adopted by CVMP, the risk management plans, and now having that available and bringing more clarity. We are learning by doing. The risk management plan was new in the regulation. Certainly, the fact that it was mandatory for novel therapy for the novel therapies. We have been struggling with it. I think we realize there's a lot of work that we need to do there in order to make that manageable, both for the applicants as well as for the regulators to deal with it. But we're learning, and I think we have a good tool there that will allow us to advance novel therapy products. And then last but not least, the 111 open framework, the internationalization, globalization, which I know has been high on the agenda of industry for a long time. It's an initiative that we can build on, but it's also, we're at the very start of that process. And I would really like to see that come to fruition, because I do think it would make it would stimulate the industry, but also the availability of veterinary medicinal products globally in a very positive way. Because if you imagine the savings that can be made by not having to prepare everything for every little region, every little country. I mean, if you look back in Europe, how we have advanced availability and harmonization, and still a lot of work to do there, and how that has created a solid basis for both innovation as well as ensuring availability of products. I think that could be seen as an example globally. So I hope that that will continue. I hope you've all enjoyed it. This has been my last info day. I've enjoyed it. The most heard question of the past days was, Ivo, who will be the next head of division? So I've saved the answer to that question for the very last minute of this meeting. I don't know. And with that, thank you very much. And I hope you will all meet next year. And het gaat jullie goed.
May I take then, is it on? May I then take the initiative and say a sincere thank you to you, Ivo. I think you have done a tremendous job for, I don't know, 15 years, is it? But pretty long.
My career started 40 years ago.
Yeah, I know that. But
I've been here in this role only 8 years.
Okay. Anyway, nevertheless, it appeared much longer. I think you had a tremendous impact. We certainly are here the last time with you, and I definitely don't want to leave here without expressing that, and I think everybody will join that. I think you led the agency, or the animal health part of the agency, into definitely a new arena, legal systems and all this. So it was a tremendous amount of work at your end. You built up a tremendous team. So a big thank you to yourself personally, but all the team as well. Thank you.